Chapter 1984. Lin Xian was in an extremely bad mood. It was as if he had fallen from the clouds into a quagmire. A moment ago, he was dazzling in a sea of flowers, surrounded by celestial lotuses, and the flower emperor bloomed for him. He thought he was the chosen one, the successor of exalted Zihua, sent by the heavens. In the next second, the heavenly lake was dead silent. It was as if he had been abandoned. Apart from the dozens of celestial lotuses around him, all the other lotuses closed as if the flower emperor had never bloomed. An indescribable sense of loss filled Lin Xian's heart. As a descendant of a noble divine path family, it was hard for him to bear such a blow. If the people accompanying him didn't push him, he would have broken down. How could this be? Lin Xian said sadly. The other Lin family cultivators didn't dare to say anything. Maybe the heavenly lake's 10,000 lotuses and the flower emperor didn't move because of young Master Lin. Supreme God Gui too said. This was the only explanation. After all, there were many cultivators from different realms here. Someone might have secretly released their Tao intent and made Lin Xian think that the sea of flowers moved because of him. Who is it? Lin Xian glanced at everyone with a sharp gaze. There was no one beside him just now. However, all the celestial lotuses in the heavenly lake bloomed in his direction. If it wasn't him, who else could it be? Young Master. Lin Rui secretly pointed at the figures in front of him. Li Chuji happened to pass by here just now. Could it be him? Impossible. Lin Xian clenched his teeth and denied it. Although he didn't admit it, a thought appeared in his mind. The strange movement in the heavenly lake might have something to do with Li Chuji. The more he thought about it, the stronger this thought became. At this moment, Lin Xian's expression was very ugly. Looking at Qin Hao's back, he wondered if this person was really related to the martial god of the sword world. Was he the martial god's disciple? A few months ago, Lin Xian was just guessing. At that time, he was just cooperating with the Kunlun Sea. Now, it seemed that Li Chuji wasn't simple at all. Otherwise, how could he make the flower emperor bloom? If he really did do it, his talent was too terrifying. Lin Xian didn't want to continue thinking about it. No matter what the truth was, he had already lost a big chance to become the successor of exalted Zihua. And this chance might be taken away by Li Chuji. At the thought of this, Lin Xian's aura became extremely cold, and the murderous intent in his eyes grew increasingly intense. The heavenly path of Kunlun would never be taken away by others, especially those from the outside world. He had to eliminate Qin Hao before he was recognized by the Kunlun Sea. Let's go. Lin Xian called out and led the group away from the heavenly lake. Junior sister, what do you think? Su Qian said as she looked at Qin Xiao. The flower emperor didn't open it because of Lin Xian. There must be other reasons. Qin Xiao was deep in thought as she recalled the scene from before. At that time, a figure passed by Lin Xian. Immediately after, the flower emperor closed and the lotuses retracted. The heavenly lake was filled with a sorrowful aura, as if it had been abandoned by a heartless person. Could it be him? Li Chuji. Qin Xiao looked in the direction that Qin Hao had left. In the battle in the city, Li Chuji's performance was extremely outstanding. With his third-level Nirvana law cultivation, he activated the divine artifact and killed many of the Lin clan's emperors. No one could withstand his sword. Not only was his swordsmanship extraordinary, but his methods were also extremely ruthless. He killed with one strike and did not care about the Lin clan status in Kunlun at all. He even cooperated with a minor celestial wheel realm cultivator to kill Kunlun's Qing Zun. From this, it could be seen that Li Chuji's talent was unquestionable. Could it be that he had triggered the phenomenon in the heavenly lake, causing the lotuses to open at the same time and the flower emperor to bloom? Qin Xiao was not sure. If that was the case, why would Li Chuji hide the truth and make a move secretly? Did he deliberately make things difficult for Lin Xian, just for revenge? Let's follow them and take a look. Su Qian also seemed to have noticed something and was interested. She and Qin Xiao followed in the direction that Qin Hao and the others had left. This year's event seemed to be very different from the previous ones. Did you do something just now? Qin Hao and the others crossed the heavenly lake and walked forward. Huan Zun smiled and said, although he had guessed the result, he still wanted to hear Qin Hao admit it himself. Yes. Qin Hao nodded and secretly operated the celestial wheel to release the tranquil water, which caused the lotuses to open at the same time and the flower emperor to bloom. Why don't you show it, and let Fairy He and Fairy Su witness it? Wuk said. In this way, they would have enough weight to be summoned by Kunlun's clan leader. It's true that there's a trace of Kunlun's will in the heavenly lake, but it's not enough to control Kunlun's heavenly Tao. Instead of attracting attention and setting up many competitors, it's better to take a good look at the opportunities in Kunlun's sea. Qin Hao smiled. Kunlun's heavenly Tao did not have much connection with the heavenly lake. You're quite shrewd. Huan Zun chuckled. Qin Hao shook his head helplessly. How could he not hide when he was traveling? Not only him, but the overlords of various realms were also hiding their trump cards. Kunlun's wonderland was endless. There were many wonderland islands scattered everywhere. Some are floating islands, and some are on the sea. It was very beautiful. Every island here emitted a different aura, containing a unique divine path opportunity, left behind by different extraordinary figures. Back then, Zihua Supreme was also a giant with a quasi-divine lord cultivation. He opened up this Kunlun Sea. Exalted Zihua was proficient in the Tao of Alchemy. He could help Nirvana forge the heavenly wheel and replenish the Tao, intent, and godly power that the heavenly wheel lacked. When the exalted Zihua was alive, countless cultivators came to ask for godly elixirs. So, not all of the divine path opportunities in this Kunlun's wonderland were left by Zihua Mountain. Most of them were left by the top overlords who asked for medicine in exchange for divine pills. These divine path opportunities were left behind for the Kunlun's brother Hai to cultivate. It was an equivalent exchange. Look over there. Wuk pointed in a direction. Everyone looked over and saw that the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. Waves of fire rushed into the sky, and a volcanic island was spewing lava. The scene was extremely terrifying. In the lava spewing into the sky, there was an illusory divine phoenix circling and crying. It was bathed in the divine fire of the great path, as if it was going to be reborn in the fire. The sharp cry it let out was frightening. At this time, many groups of overlords were heading toward the lava divine mountain. They stood at the edge of the mountain and watched the divine phoenix circling in the flames as if waiting for something. The spirit of the phoenix. Qin Hao looked at all of this, and his heart trembled. On the celestial mountain, lava was rolling, and the divine fire was eternal. A peerless master had left behind the divine will of the celestial wheel. The illusory phoenix bathed in the divine fire was the condensation of the master's divine will. Even though they were far away from the celestial mountain, Qin Hao could feel the horror of the spewing divine fire. The destructive power was terrifying. Even the red lotus divine fire could not resist it. The divine fire of the phoenix, the real divine fire of the phoenix. The phoenix spirit is summoning me. Kuang Tang's eyes instantly became bloodshot, and he flew toward the celestial mountain uncontrollably. He wanted to throw himself into the divine fire. Illusion Elder, stop him. Qin Hao could not help but be shocked. If Kuang Tang threw himself into the divine fire, he would definitely die. When the Illusion Elder saw this, his figure flashed and flew out. In the next moment, he stood firmly in front of Kuang Tang, not allowing him to get close. Get out of the way, Kuang Tang shouted at the Illusion Elder. The phoenix spirit in the divine fire was summoning him, and he would transform because of it. Tang, calm down. Qin Hao chased over and took out the blood pistol pill. Not allowing Kuang Tang to resist, Wuk covered his mouth, and Qin Hao stuffed the entire bottle of pills into Kuang Tang's mouth. Gulp! As the pills entered his stomach, the aura of the phoenix tree flower calmed Kuang Tang's emotions a little. The blood in his eyes gradually faded. I can't control myself. The phoenix spirit land is indeed summoning me. Kuang Tang said apologetically. The divine fire of the celestial mountain is the divine fire of Tianlun. Even old man would find it hard to resist. Don't be impulsive, the Illusion Elder warned sternly. But Kuang Tang pointed at the phoenix spirit bathed in the divine fire. His eyes were filled with desire. He was not being impulsive, but he really felt it. Listen to me. The divine flame of the celestial mountain is not ordinary. It was set up by a great celestial wheel expert, so you can't take it by force. Take a look. Qin Hao pointed at the celestial mountain. At this moment, someone had already made a move on the celestial phoenix. Kuang Tang turned his head and saw a fiery explosion. All the cultivators who were close to the celestial mountain and wanted to break through to the divine flame were sent flying while vomiting blood. Their clothes were torn apart, and there were even some who screamed as they were burned to death by the divine flame. Sister, Kuang Tang cried like a child. Junior brother, help Kuang Tang seize the phoenix spirit. I also feel that Kuang Tang will transform. Muri transmitted her voice. When Kuang Tang was born, she had already left the Phoenix clan. Kuang Tang was the younger brother of the Phoenix clan ancestor, so it was fine for him to call her sister. Moreover, Kuang Tang's innate spiritual sense was incomplete. It was quite distressing. All right, Qin Hao nodded. He looked at the fiery light on the celestial mountain. No matter how difficult it was, he had to follow his senior sister's orders. He said to Kuang Tang, I will help you break the divine fire barrier. No matter what happens next, you have to rely on yourself. Do you understand? The great Tianlun expert with fire divine force was paying attention. Breaking the barrier was already the limit of Qin Hao's ability. He could not protect Kuang Tang anymore. After all, Kuang Tang would die if he was tainted by the Phoenix Spirit's fire chi. This was not the divine wilderness continent. The divine fire of the celestial mountain contained powerful divine force. If Kuang Tang was burned to death, Qin Hao would not be able to use the power of the heavenly path to find his soul. Even if he controlled the will of the Kunlun continent, he would not be able to find him. Let him go. Muri seemed to be very confident in Kuang Tang. Okay. Kuang Tang nodded heavily. He would be responsible for any consequences. As you wish, senior sister. Qin Hao said. You must be careful, Xiaohan said. Her tone was a little nervous. The divine path's opportunity that Zihua had allowed to be left behind was not to be underestimated. The group moved closer to the celestial mountain. A large number of fire cultivators had gathered here. They all tried to break through the divine fire barrier and seize the phoenix spirit within. However, no one succeeded. Puff! Blood gushed out an old man's mouth like a fountain. The radiance of the celestial wheel around his body dimmed, and the skin on his palms split open. He looked at the spirit of the phoenix and the divine fire and sighed. It seems that this divine will is not fated to be with me. Alas! After he finished speaking, the old man flew away. Even a celestial wheel cultivator who was proficient in the flames of the great path could not break through this barrier of divine fire. Are you ready? Qin Hao glanced at Kuang Tang. Kuang Tang nodded silently. Seeing a divine-level expert injured by the backlash, the desire in his eyes did not diminish. The determination in his heart surpassed life and death. Okay, Qin Hao said. His bright eyes looked at the divine fire in front of him. In terms of divine power, he was not as powerful as the senior who had left behind the Phoenix Spirit. In terms of the quality of the divine fire, the Red Lotus fire, nurtured by the perfect heavenly path, was not inferior to the other's divine fire. He was confident that he could cut open this barrier. Chapter 1985. Outside the divine fire on the celestial mountain, a large number of experts attacked the barrier, trying to seize the divine will of the Phoenix Spirit. Even though many people failed, they still refused to give up. In an instant, the roar of Tao techniques on this celestial mountain was endless. At this moment, Qin Hao was standing in the air in front of the barrier. Facing the burning barrier, his skin felt a faint pain. The Tianlun in his body operated, and a strand of divine consciousness went into the fire to feel the strength of the divine fire. Immediately, a fierce burning force came and went straight into his soul. Visible to the naked eye, his clothes were surrounded by a layer of flame particles, as if it was going to burn him on the spot. Qin Hao let out a muffled groan. His body trembled, and sweat seeped out of his forehead. His face was slightly pale. What a powerful fire! Although the senior who left behind the phoenix spirit didn't have the best Tianlun, his flame power was extremely shocking. Qin Hao fell a little and was almost injured. No wonder others couldn't break the barrier. Even a small Tianlun couldn't withstand the power of the divine fire. Birds of a feather flocked together. As expected, those who dared to step into the Kunlun Sea and ask for medicine from Supreme Zihua weren't simple. "Kid, are you okay?" Illusion Elder stepped forward and asked. Seeing Qin Hao's situation, he was a little worried. The fire was so strong that even a perfect Tianlun couldn't withstand it. "I'm fine," Qin Hao said softly and stared ahead. The senior who left the phoenix spirit was indeed extraordinary. It seemed that the barrier wasn't simple either. He couldn't attack from the surface. Thinking of this, Qin Hao's eyes gradually became demonic. Lines appeared on his eyes, and his gaze penetrated the divine fire. It was as if he could see the trajectory of the opponent's divine will. Everything gradually became clear. "I see. The divine power flowing on the barrier wasn't an ordinary barrier. It was enhanced by divine power. Don't be too serious. The expert's methods are brilliant. Didn't you see that so many experts failed? You're just a Nirvana realm cultivator with 3 layers of laws. If you're too greedy, you might lose your life," someone in the distance said. Seeing Qin Hao seriously staring at the divine fire, he reminded him to give up when it was time. The divine will of the phoenix spirit wasn't something Qin Hao was qualified to obtain. "Thank you for your kindness. I know what I'm doing." Qin Hao looked over and replied, "That's right." Seeing this, the person sneered and ignored him. Qin Hao took a deep breath and returned to the state he was in just now. His divine consciousness reached out to the barrier in front of him and melted into the divine fire. It converged with the divine will of the cultivator. This time, an image was reflected in his eyes. The barrier seemed to have come alive. Countless ancient characters were floating in the flames. Each character was shining with the divine light of the great path. They resonated with each other and emitted a terrifying divine power that filled the barrier. When Qin Hao's divine consciousness tried to merge into a rune, in an instant, a raging radiance of flames rushed out from the rune. It was as if a fist had come crashing down, shaking Qin Hao's spiritual soul. The crackling and crackling of the flames on the barrier was incomparably intense. It was as if it was going to burn all the heavens. It actually caused a chain reaction. All the runes began to burst forth with the divine flames of the great path. A blurry figure appeared in the flames. The figure threw out punch after punch, unleashing a monstrous fist might. Every punch seemed to have landed on Qin Hao's body. Fist technique. Qin Hao saw it clearly. The divine will that filled the barrier was a set of divine flame fist technique. The figure was as valiant as the god of fire. Every punch carried a terrifying explosive force. Buzz. Divine light fell on Qin Hao. It was dazzling. The great void sword hummed and floated beside him. The two resonated. The light of the sword kept flowing to Qin Hao. It wrapped around his body and made him emit a majestic divine will. It was as if he was borrowing the power of the divine implement. "Look over there." Many people noticed the commotion. They pointed at Qin Hao, who was surrounded by the sword light. This silver-haired youth was borrowing the power of the divine implement. What was he doing? Could it be that he wanted to split the divine fire of the celestial mountain? Was he not afraid of being burned by the divine fire? Qin Hao smiled faintly. In order not to expose his cultivation, he had to create an illusion to confuse these cultivators. Then, Qin Hao pointed with his sword finger. The divine light of the great void soared into the sky. The blood-red flame gradually covered the sky, making him emit the might of precepts. He pointed forward. Slash. There was a boom. The great void sword exploded with sword chi that was hundreds of meters long. It fell diagonally with the billowing blood flame. It slashed on the celestial mountain and made a loud noise with the enchantment. Although this sword shook the enchantment and made the flames tumble, it did not cut it open as expected. What a powerful sword chi! A mere holiness of Nirvana cultivator actually used this sword to unleash the attack power of a heavenly wheel cultivator. Many onlookers were shocked. Qin Hao frowned. He activated the Red Lotus divine power with a perfect heavenly wheel and integrated it into this sword. It could not shake the divine fire enchantment. It seemed that there was only one way. Qin Hao slowly closed his eyes and released his aura. The power of the original realm intersected with this world, trying to communicate with the heavenly path of Kunlun. Only by using the suppression of the will of the heavenly path of Kunlun could he suppress the divine fire and cut open the enchantment of the celestial mountain. At this time, as Qin Hao's aura spread, below, the seawater of Kunlun rolled endlessly. Strange sounds came from a void, as if two people were talking. The cultivators near the celestial mountain gradually felt the pressure, as if they were being suppressed by a heavenly might. It was getting stronger and stronger. Those who were weaker soon could not resist and were about to fall into the sea. They quickly flew away from this area, far away from the celestial mountain. Qin Hao's will merged with the will of the heavenly path of Kunlun. The divine glory on his body became more and more dazzling. Along with this, the trembling of the great void sword became more and more intense, giving people a feeling that the sword was getting stronger. Soon, relying on the power of the original realm, Qin Hao's will dominated this area. When his divine consciousness pressed down on the divine fire of the celestial mountain, the brilliance of the enchantment shook and rippled. It was visible to the naked eye that the fire began to weaken. What's going on? Some people found that the divine fire of the enchantment had weakened a little. The heavenly will cultivators felt this very clearly. It was as if the celestial mountain was suppressed by the will of Kunlun. At this moment, Qin Hao shouted, "Tang!" Then the great void sword flew out again. It carried the might of the heavenly path of Kunlun and slashed down heavily. The emerald light cut across the sky and cut into the enchantment of the celestial mountain with a beautiful arc of light. Chi, the blood-red flame blade, came into contact with the enchantment. The latter cracked like an eggshell, creating a dense spiderweb. Then, with a loud bang, the enchantment of the divine fire collapsed. The great void sword actually cut a smooth path through the divine fire, and the end of it led straight to the spiraling phoenix spirit. Crazed Tang had been waiting for a long time. When he saw this scene, he followed the path cut open by the sword aura and flew in. He threw himself into the huge phoenix spirit and merged with the will of the heavenly path. Oh no! He cut open the divine fire. The cultivators around the celestial mountain were agitated. They were all nervous and rushed toward the path cut open by Qin Hao, wanting to seize the phoenix spirit. Who dares to interfere? Huan Zun stepped in the air, creating turbulent spatial fluctuations. The figures that rushed over were all sent flying back. Xiao Han and Wuk also protected the path of the sword, not allowing outsiders to get close. They were the ones who cut open the enchantment, so the divine intent of the phoenix spirit belonged to Tang. How could they let outsiders seize it? However, there were too many cultivators. There were many Heavenly Wheel Realm cultivators participating in the Kunlun Sea meeting. Just near the Celestial Mountain, there were no less than 5 or 6 people. They all released their Heavenly Wheel Realm power, wanting to join the fight. Everyone, let's just wait quietly. Qin Hao dispersed his aura and cut off the fusion with the heavenly path of Kunlun. The heavenly path of the falling celestial mountain disappeared. In the next moment, the weakened mountain fire soared under the support of the divine technique. The collapsed enchantment automatically reformed, and the path of the sword that led to the inside also closed. This, countless cultivators watched and sighed. In this way, no one could break the divine fire, and no one could compete with Crazed Tang for the will of the heavenly path. Hearing the loud cries of the phoenix coming from inside the celestial mountain, the cultivators who were ready to make a move were annoyed. However, they didn't leave but stood guard outside. Even if someone broke into the divine fire enchantment, they might not be able to refine the will of the heavenly path. Refining it was fine, as they could still extract the will of the heavenly path from Tang. After all, there were many heavenly wheel realm cultivators here, and some of them could do it. Although it would cause great harm to Tang, it wasn't important to them. Qin Hao looked at the surrounding cultivators and felt a strong threat from them. However, he didn't care. He had the ability to split the divine fire, and he could also use it to burn those who had bad intentions. Even if a few more heavenly wheel realm cultivators came, it would be useless if their cultivation wasn't as strong as the senior who set the divine fire. Next, success or failure will depend on your luck. Qin Hao looked at the raging flames on the celestial mountain. His only worry was whether Craze Tang could withstand the phoenix spirit. He had done what he needed to do. The rest depended on Craze Tang. At this moment, Qin Hao's fiery eyes flickered. His divine consciousness entered the flames and continued to comprehend the divine flame fist technique. The senior who created this fist technique was extremely talented. He used the explosive characteristics of the flame divine power in an ingenious manner. Cultivating this fist technique was also a kind of improvement for Qin Hao. In the process of comprehending, the figure appeared in Qin Hao's eyes again. He punched out, and the pressure was transmitted back to his senses. It was as if it had entered his soul. He carefully memorized every detail and every movement. Qin Hao found that the specialty of his fist technique was to explode from the inside out. When the divine power hit the opponent's divine technique, or even the body, it would suddenly explode. It was similar to the 7-injuring fist of Xiaogui's father, Qidashio. They both broke the defense from the inside. The difference was that this divine flame fist technique wouldn't backfire on the body. It was much better than the 7-injuring fist. Qin Hao quietly comprehended. In his mind, a silhouette seemed to appear, punching out together with the silhouette in the flames. Gradually, the fire qi emitted from his body grew stronger and stronger. Even Xiao Han and Wu Kei, who were at the side, couldn't endure it and retreated far away. It was as if they would be burned by the fire qi emitted by him if they got too close. What a strong comprehension ability. The illusion reverend looked at the intoxicated Qin Hao. He could even cultivate like this, as expected of a perfect Tianlun who had obtained the power of the original realm. The illusion reverend knew that the beings of the original realm had an innate cultivation advantage from the moment they were born. Whether it was comprehension ability or cultivation speed, they were stronger than the beings of the original realm. This was something he couldn't compare to at the moment. Perhaps when he obtained the space god position of the divine desolate heavenly path, he would be able to make up for some of the flaws in his Tianlin. Time passed little by little. After Kuang Tang entered the divine flame barrier, he let out a few loud phoenix cries at first, but after that, there was no more movement. On the other hand, Qin Hao was immersed in the cultivation of the divine flame fist technique. The fire aura emitted from his body became stronger and stronger. In the end, even the illusion reverend couldn't endure it and kept a distance from him. Standing beside Qin Hao, the illusion reverend felt as if his Tianlun was about to explode and burn. Exploding flame. Qin Hao's closed eyes suddenly opened. His eyes shot out a bright light. Rumble. The void rumbled. It was as if there was a fist energy blasting out from his position. It condensed into a blood-colored divine flame and suddenly exploded not far away. The void shattered, and the space was severely distorted. Thick black smoke appeared. The great path seemed to have shattered into millions of pieces and gradually melted. What shocking power! Qin Hao looked at this scene. The divine flame fist technique left behind by the expert was simply tailor-made for his red lotus fire. It could bring out the characteristics of the exploding flame to the extreme. This trip was really worth it. After that, Qin Hao's eyes focused in another direction. With a rumble, a ball of black smoke appeared there. Just like before, the space was shattered and severely distorted. The great Tao shattered into millions of pieces, and a horrifying deep black hole appeared. Then, no matter where Qin Hao looked, there would suddenly explode and become a terrifying black hole, causing the nearby cultivators to flee in panic. Qin Hao was not satisfied with the current situation. The Tao gave birth to 1, 2, and 3. With a sweep of his will, 5 or 6 terrifying black holes appeared at the same time. In the blink of an eye, following the sound of explosions, the area around the celestial mountain became a scene of devastation. Black smoke billowed everywhere. The black holes that were blasted out could not be repaired by the heavenly Tao. Countless experts watched in fear. What kind of divine technique was this? The destructive power of a small nirvana was so shocking that even the heavenly Tao could not repair it. Until now, no one knew that this divine technique was obtained by Qin Hao from the boundary of the celestial mountain. Boom, 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 boom. The continuous sounds of explosions attracted a large number of experts to watch from afar. Even the Kunlun sea fairies were alarmed. They sensed that someone was wantonly destroying the celestial mountain and could not help but rush over. Chapter 1986. Someone has cultivated the celestial mountain's divine flame. Figures flashed over. The fairies of the Kunlun Sea looked at the explosive flame power released by Qin Hao. Its power was actually the same as the divine flame of the celestial mountain. They couldn't help but be surprised. Of course, they knew that the divine flame on the mountain was condensed by an expert's divine will, and a set of divine techniques was hidden. Unfortunately, the disciples of the previous generations could not comprehend it. Today, the divine technique was cultivated by an outsider. It seemed that many peerless geniuses had come to this year's event. Qin Hao sensed that more and more people were gathering. Only then did he realize that he seemed to have inadvertently taken the limelight. He couldn't help but smile brightly. He stopped cultivating and looked at the divine flame barrier. Tang had been in there for a long time. Logically speaking, whether the fusion of the divine will was successful or not, there should be some abnormalities. Why was there no movement? Could it be? Just when Qin Hao had a bad premonition in his heart, an enormous rumbling sound came from ahead, and the barrier of flames that enveloped the immortal mountain suddenly collapsed. In an instant, streams of flames shot out in all directions, and the surging divine flames shocked the numerous experts to the point of retreating madly. A resonant divine cry resounded throughout the heavens and the earth, and the enormous phoenix spirit actually flew out from the divine flames, and its entire body was covered in raging flames as it floated high up in the sky. As the flames gradually converged, the huge phoenix spirit shrank smaller and smaller until it finally condensed into a figure. Qin Hao and the others saw that Tang's clothes were tattered as if he had suffered a great injury. His clothes were full of blood. However, as the divine will of the phoenix spirit shrank and turned into wisps of light that entered his body, the aura that Tang exuded became even stronger. Rolling pressure filled the air as if it could burn the heavens. It was as if he had already become the incarnation of the phoenix spirit. He's breaking through, Illusion Elder said happily. At this time, Tang's eyes were closed. His messy short hair had grown a lot longer and danced in the wind. The divine flame wrapped around his body, and even his appearance was much younger. It seemed that he hadn't woken up from the fusion and was still absorbing and refining the divine will power of the phoenix spirit. Who is that? A Kunlun sea fairy pointed in Tang's direction. Her fellow disciples beside her shook their heads. They didn't know him. However, this person had broken through the barrier of the celestial mountain and obtained the divine will left behind by the expert. At this moment, many cultivators had already set their eyes on Tang. After witnessing him absorbing the divine will, they began to get restless. Since the owner of this divine will was acquainted with exalted Zihua, he must be an extraordinary almighty as well. Previously, when everyone tried to break the barrier, they all failed. Even the heavenly wheel realm masters could only watch helplessly. It was enough to show how powerful this divine will was. Now, the divine will have been taken by someone else. How could the elites of the various worlds not have covetous thoughts? Kid, I'm afraid we're going to have a fight soon. Illusion Sovereign looked at the surrounding experts and transmitted his voice to Qin Hao. Although this place belonged to the Kunlun Sea, The people of the Kunlun Sea couldn't get involved in the disputes here. The reason why they held this event was to attract experts from all over to this place and remember exalted Zihua. No matter what happened or who obtained the good fortune, the host would not care. Now that Tang had obtained the Phoenix Spirit Divine Decree, their small group would definitely be bullied by powerful forces and forced to hand over the Divine Decree. As the core of the team, how could Qin Hao hand over Tang? A battle was unavoidable. Wang, high up in the sky, a fiery glow filled the sky. With crazed Tang as the center, the glow radiated for thousands of miles. His aura was still strengthening. Strands of divine fire seeped out of his flesh and blood. The remaining divine fire on the celestial mountain also turned into strands and wrapped around Kuang Tang's body, tempering his monarch body and merging into his divine soul. They were no longer separated from each other. Gradually, the light of the 9 realms of the martial path appeared on Tang's body. It became more and more dazzling. This was the sign of nirvana. He had crossed the unblemished pinnacle from the true self realm and stepped into nirvana. He had begun to walk towards the divine path. Nirvana, the true nirvana, was the most difficult threshold of the 4 realms of the Emperor Tao. Many cultivators in the Eldritch world were stuck at this threshold and had no hope of stepping into the divine path. The Tao ancestor, Feng Lan, and even Tang's elder brother, the Phoenix Patriarch, as well as the 4 divine wave slayer generals who cultivated under the setting sun battle god, Alu, Zhuge Xiu, and so many transcendent emperors in the divine wilderness. Only Zhan Wu and Wuk had reached this step. Zhan Wu had the honest battle scripture and was originally recultivating the divine path. It was not difficult for him to reach nirvana. Wuk had merged with the Zhuiying Sword Emperor's Sword Soul and the 2 unblemished sword powers to reach nirvana. Now, there was one more nirvana in the divine wilderness. Tang. Only after reaching nirvana could one be qualified to condense precepts and break through to the heavenly wheel divine level. Buzz. The divine flames dissipated, and the wisps of fire chi completely disappeared from crazed Tang's body. He slowly opened his eyes. At this moment, his eyes seemed to be flickering with 2 divine flames. With a glance, it seemed to be able to burn the divine soul of others. There was an invisible pressure of the divine path. How do you feel? Qin Hao stepped forward and asked. At first, even with senior sister Muri's approval, he was worried that Tang would die in the Phoenix Spirit Divine Decree. The probability was less than 10%, or even less than 1%. He did not expect this. Tang had brought him a big surprise. So this is nirvana, Tang murmured. He felt the surging power in his body. The divine decree made his body and mind transform, baptizing the Phoenix clan's flame power and allowing him to be reborn from the fire. However, other than the huge change in his strength, he did not feel any other changes. He originally thought that the divine decree could make up for his divine sense. Becoming stronger is ultimately a good thing. Take your time with the rest. Qin Hao patted Tang's shoulder and encouraged him. Only now did he understand that the master who left behind the divine decree should be from the demon clan. It should be the real divine phoenix. Tang's ancestor was the ancient phoenix god of the divine wilderness. He had the phoenix will of the original realm. Although there was some risk in merging with the power of the phoenix god from other planes, he still had the advantage. No wonder senior sister would allow it. She probably already saw through the essence of the phoenix will of the celestial mountain. As for Tang's divine sense, it was difficult for him to control it after erupting with power. This needed to be slowly adjusted. It was not something that ordinary divine medicine and divine decree could make up for. Tang nodded gratefully at Qin Hao. He knew very well that it was all thanks to Qin Hao that he could transform and enter nirvana. Otherwise, he would not have the ability to split open the barrier of the celestial mountain. Congratulations. Illusion Elder came to congratulate him. Tang, congratulations. Another nirvana. It seems that I have to hurry up and improve my precepts. Otherwise, you will soon catch up. Wuk smiled. He felt pressure from Tang, which was also a motivation to urge him. He Tang scratched his head and laughed foolishly. His eyes were filled with pride. If his brother saw this scene, he would definitely jump up in jealousy. Fellow Taoist, the Celestial Mountain's Phoenix Spirit is a disciple that was specially left in Kunlun by the Master. We all cultivate the great path of fire. We came to the meeting today to improve our abilities. You took the Phoenix Spirit and left us empty-handed. Isn't that not good? At this time, an old man with black spots on his face spoke. He wore a divine robe and gave off a domineering and serious feeling. When he spoke, the void trembled. He was obviously a master of the divine path who had cast the celestial wheel. As soon as the old man spoke, the crowd nodded. Who didn't want to comprehend the Phoenix Spirit's divine will and improve their cultivation? After all, the Kunlun meeting only happened once in 1,000 years. Now that the opportunity was gone, it was inevitable that they would feel unbalanced. Old mister, you are wrong. Opportunities belong to those who are capable. The divine will was refined by my friend. That is his ability. How can you say that he took it for himself? Qin Hao said, took it for himself? Whose family did this belong to? The host of the Kunlun Sea didn't say anything. The group of outsiders who came to the meeting were indignant. Did they owe the other party something? Refined, you can also take it out. Being happy alone is not as good as being happy together. One person achieving the Tao is not as good as 100 people ascending. Fellow Taoist, why don't you let your friend take out the divine will for everyone to comprehend? If you find it troublesome, I am willing to do it for you. Another middle-aged man stood up and said. His smiling face gave people a cold feeling. He dared to stand up at this time, so he must be extremely confident in his cultivation. How can you take something that has merged with the flesh and refined into the divine soul, just like that? Qin Hao stared at the middle-aged man and said, I see that you are full of energy and your divine will is not weak. Why don't you take the initiative to break your divine soul into 1,000 strands? Everyone here can get a strand and refine your divine path power. Won't that be a happy ending for everyone? How dare you? Behind a middle-aged man, an old man was furious. How dare he be so disrespectful to their supreme God and take the initiative to break his divine soul? Take out the divine will and take a good look at who is here. Hand it over obediently, and we won't make things difficult for you. Otherwise, the old man with the spots paused, and his face became gloomy. What if I don't? Qin Hao shouted and stared at the old man. In an instant, a terrifying flame rushed out of Qin Hao's body and smashed directly at the old man with the spots like a heavy punch. The old man's face tightened, and he raised his hand to slap it. A strong light of particles surged in his palm. Boom! A cloud of black smoke exploded in front of the old man. The fierce shock force forced the old man to stagger back. He looked down at his palm and saw that his skin and flesh were torn. He couldn't help but be shocked and said, what a powerful flame technique. A mere nirvana realm cultivator with 3 levels of laws injured his divine body in one move. The white-haired young man had activated a set of powerful divine techniques. Qin Hao didn't say much. He pointed his sword finger, and the great void sword came out. The sword radiance pierced through and crossed the great path of space. It directly landed in front of the old man, and the tip of the sword almost pierced into his eyeballs. The old man's face changed, and he roared. He clenched his fists, and a bright divine wheel was released. The divine flame power flowed through his meridians to his limbs. Unfortunately, only his body and head were not covered by the divine radiance. An incomplete divine wheel. Bang! There was a muffled explosion. Even though the celestial wheel was incomplete, its explosive power was not to be underestimated. The moment the elder released the celestial wheel, his divine power restrained the great void, sword momentum, and forced it back. A few drops of cold sweat trickled down his cheeks. What a fast sword! Do it! The gloomy middle-aged man shouted as he reached out his hand to grab Kuang Tang. Many emperors behind him followed suit. In an instant, Emperor Light covered the sky and covered the earth like a torrential downpour, bombarding Qin Hao's group and drowning them in the light. The illusion sovereign snorted and walked toward the gloomy middle-aged man. The other party wasn't a heavenly path cultivator from Kunlun and was also restricted by the heavenly might. There was no need to fear the other party and didn't need Qin Hao's help. Die! Wuk looked coldly at the cultivator who attacked. He raised his finger and pointed forward. An extremely sharp golden light shot out from his fingertip. It was the golden finger. With a puff, blood splattered everywhere. The penetrating power of this light was terrifying. After it merged with the true extreme Sword Emperor's laws, the other party's defense was like a thin piece of paper. It directly pierced through the chest of a Nirvana realm cultivator and his divine soul, killing him on the spot. Then, the sword lotus under Wuk's feet bloomed. Thousands of sword chi surged out and shot toward the sky. Those who tried to snatch the divine wheel from the front were either killed or injured. Those below the Nirvana realm had almost no resistance. Chapter 1987. Xiaohan and Kuang Tang attacked at the same time. They held their divine swords and stabbed forward. Startling sword chi flew everywhere. Due to his low cultivation level, Xiaohan couldn't perfectly display the power of the divine artifact. Under Wuk's protection, he could barely protect himself. Kuang Tang merged with the Phoenix spirit and had a huge increase in cultivation. Unfortunately, the people here weren't ordinary. Emperors were extraordinary, so his performance was limited. Boom! The sword Qi Flawless emitted was ferocious and murderous, causing an advanced rebirth realm expert to raise his palm and press down when he saw this. The might of his palm that contained the 8th level of the laws heavily smashed on a Flawless, causing the Grand Tao, Sword Lotus, to instantly shatter while the Flawless Sword Insight dispersed, causing a mouthful of blood to spray from his mouth as his figure was blasted over 100 him away. Qin Hao glanced over. There were too many enemies, and most of them were not weaker than Wuk. The situation was not good for them. They couldn't delay and had to end the battle quickly. First, they had to kill a heavenly will cultivator and intimidate the others. Go! Qin Hao manipulated the Great Void Sword and gave up on attacking the Elder with black spots. It fell toward Wuk. Soon after, the divine artifact transformed into its original form and hung upside down. It released the brilliance of the precepts and bathed Wuk and the others, forming a layer of enchantment. As hundreds of spells bombarded over, they were all blocked by the barrier of the divine cauldron. It was firm and unbreakable. Wuk and the other two were bathed in the light of the Great Void. They attacked continuously and killed many more people. Even with a few upper-level Nirvana cultivators attacking, they couldn't break the defense of the divine cauldron. At this moment, Qin Hao stared at the old man. His divine consciousness swept out and covered the celestial mountain. The remaining divine fire on the mountain turned into streams of lava and swept back. Under the control of Qin Hao's divine consciousness, countless streams of fire spread out and formed a divine diagram of the Great Path. The terrifying pressure caused the old man's expression to change. Not good. The old man thought and quickly retreated. The silver-haired young man could actually use the divine fire of the celestial mountain. This divine flame was the divine will of a transcendent expert. Previously, when so many experts attacked, they were unable to break it apart. One could imagine how powerful it was. Under the control of Qin Hao's divine will, the flow of lava filled the divine diagram of the Great Path. It was like a cloud of fire that could burn the heavens. The trajectory of its flow became more and more profound. Invisibly, it seemed to have gathered into a peerless grand matrix. Qin Hao merged the array formation of the Divine Palace's uni peak into the divine fire. As his cultivation level increased, and he stepped into the divine path, the power of the array formation evolved into a divine array. Kill! Qin Hao's expression was cold as he controlled the formation to suppress the gloomy middle-aged man. His actual target was not the black-spotted old man. Rumble! The divine fire array diagram fell down, and lava rained down like a meteor. The illusion venerable had already received Qin Hao's instructions and retreated in time, leaving the gloomy middle-aged man floating there alone. This The gloomy middle-aged man raised his head and saw the terrifying divine fire flying out from the celestial mountain. It was actually heading toward his head. His mind was shaken. He couldn't escape. When the illusion elder retreated, he had already used a divine technique to seal this space. He could only face it head-on. Boom! The radiance of the Tianluan bloomed, and the gloomy middle-aged man also burst out with all his strength. His Tianluan glowed with a dazzling white light, and wisps of pale white flames wandered in the Tianluan, connecting all parts of his body. But his divine power did not cover his entire body. Like the black-spotted old man, it belonged to an incomplete Tianluan. At this time, the gloomy middle-aged man felt as if doomsday had arrived. Cold sweat covered his cheeks as he roared and urged his divine power to attack the divine fire array diagram. The two precepts collided, and the void rolled violently. The seawater of the Kunlun Sea shook up huge waves that were thousands of feet high. Heaven and earth trembled crazily as if they were about to be destroyed. The divine fire array diagram pressed down, and the divine fire of the great Tianlun cultivator penetrated the white light. Like sulfur melting, the divine power of the gloomy middle-aged man was incinerated and dissipated. Finally, in less than a few breaths, it pressed down on his head and was absorbed into his eyes. No! A hoarse cry spread out, and the movement around the celestial mountain fell silent with this cry. Cultivators from all realms witnessed a Tianluan cultivator being incinerated by the divine fire. His body melted, and his will dissipated into heaven and earth. Divine Lord, the old man who had scolded Qin Hao before cried bitterly. How could this be? Why did the divine fire on the celestial mountain fly out for no reason and burn his master to death? At this time, the old man looked at Qin Hao's position. It was him. The divine fire of the celestial mountain could be driven by the silver-haired young man. Puff! A sword ray came in an instant and pierced through his heart. The old man's figure fell from the void into the divine sea. Is there anyone else who wants to try to comprehend the will of the divine fire? Qin Hao glanced at all the cultivators. The divine fire array diagram that burned the gloomy middle-aged man did not disappear. It was as if it could fly in front of anyone according to his will. The cultivators from all realms present all changed their expressions. It seems that no one wants to comprehend it. We will not accompany you. Old sir, do you have any objections? Qin Hao looked at the black-spotted old man. There are many opportunities in the Kunlun Sea. Since you have inherited the master's unique skill, it proves that you are not destined to be with us. The old man will go elsewhere to have a look. The black-spotted old man's face trembled. He did not dare to have any objections. After he finished speaking, he turned and left. For a time, the cultivators gathered on the celestial mountain scattered. The few heavenly wheel realm cultivators who did not fight before could do nothing. They wanted to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight, waiting for the illusion elder and the gloomy middle-aged man to injure each other. But they did not expect that the silver-haired young man was the most powerful one. Now that the divine fire of the celestial mountain could be controlled by Qin Hao, there was basically no one here who could be his opponent. There was no hope of fighting for the phoenix spirit. Instead of wasting their lives, it was better to look for other opportunities. Let's go. Qin Hao smiled and said to everyone, yes. Everyone nodded. Wuck wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Although the battle was short, the process was extremely dangerous. The slightest mistake could have killed him. His cultivation was still too weak. He could not resist an upper nirvana or even a middle nirvana. Not only Wuck, but Xiaohan also needed to urgently improve his cultivation. Fortunately, they had Qin Hao for this trip. Illusion Elder, do you know where is a good place to go? Qin Hao asked. In the Kunlun Sea, there is a divine site called the Seven Sword Mountain. I believe it is a wonderful place. The Illusion Elder smiled and said. He naturally understood the meaning of Qin Hao's words. The so-called good place was a good place for everyone to improve. While Qin Hao was cultivating the divine technique, the Illusion Elder heard some people talking about the Seven Sword Mountain in the Kunlun Sea. It also contained the divine path sword will of a powerful being. If he could obtain it, it would be of great help to Wuck. Everyone had a new goal. After leaving the Celestial Mountain, they headed towards the Seven Sword Mountain. The divine fire was also taken away by Qin Hao. Another heavenly wheel realm cultivator has fallen. Just as they walked forward, two figures soon appeared in the Celestial Mountain. Looking at the cracked and lifeless Celestial Mountain, Fairy Sue's state of mind was slightly shaken. Although the phoenix spirit was taken by that person, the person who really opened the divine fire was Li Chuji. It seems that he intended to give the opportunity to his companion. His character is not bad. Qin Xiaohe felt the Tao will of the cold middle-aged man disappear and could not help but sigh. A while ago, Kunlun's Qingzun had just died. Today, another heavenly wheel realm cultivator had died in the hands of Qin Hao. How could she not look at him in a new light? It was not easy for a heavenly wheel realm cultivator to die. Even if the flourishing Kunlun Sea Conference attracted many experts and disputes were common, most of the people who died were Emperor's Tao subordinates. How could a heavenly wheel realm cultivator die so easily? However, once they encountered Li Chuji, no matter what realm you were at, a heavenly wheel realm cultivator could not escape the nightmare. It was really... So his name is Li Chuji. Junior sister, do you know this person? Fairy Sue chuckled. We're just acquaintances, not close. This person has a divine item from the original realm. It is said that he may be a disciple of the martial god of the Great Path Sword Realm. Qin Xiao said, he has a divine item from the original realm and is a disciple of the martial god. No wonder. Fairy Sue nodded. The cold middle-aged man's death was not unjust. Many strange divine items from the original realm could help cultivators communicate with the will of the heavenly path. Moreover, Li Chuji was a disciple of the martial god. How could his talent be mediocre? It seemed that a Nirvana plane cultivator had the strength of a heavenly wheel realm cultivator. It would be strange if those blind fellows were not defeated by Li Chuji. In that case, I think that the Flower Emperor's strange movement may be related to Li Chuji. Maybe he has a chance to inherit the divine power of the Supreme Venerable, Fairy Sue said. This made Qin Xiaohe slightly stunned. She looked at Su Qian and said, Senior sister's evaluation is not low. In the past 10,000 years, there had been countless geniuses in the previous conferences. Today was the first time she heard Senior Sister Su evaluate a person who had a chance to obtain the divine power of the Supreme Venerable. They have gone to the Seven Sword Mountain. Junior sister, shall we continue to take a look? Fairy Sue said, do you think that Li Chuji will take the Sword Emperor's unique skill? This? Ha! Let's go and take a look. Qin Xiaohe smiled. The two of them walked in the direction of the Seven Sword Mountain. Their hearts were filled with anticipation. The Seven Sword Mountain was located in the vast and endless Kunlun Sea. It was one of the 7 special sword peaks. It was said that these sword peaks were left behind by an extraordinary almighty of the sword realm. His name was the Sword Emperor, the Emperor of the Sword Gods. He was not the martial emperor. The Sword Emperor was an ancient almighty of the sword realm. Because he accidentally offended a divine king, he was killed and died many years ago. However, he had once stepped into the Kunlun Sea and asked for medicine from the Supreme Venerable on Mount Zihua. In return, he left behind a unique sword technique. Qin Hao and the others walked towards the Seven Sword Mountain. On the way, the Illusion Elder told everyone the rumors he had heard. When Qin Hao heard the name of the Divine King from the Illusion Elder, his brows slightly furrowed. He said, I know that person. He is a legendary senior. Not only did he know, but Qin Hao had also seen him from afar. It was a very long time ago. The Illusion Elder looked at Qin Hao with surprise. He was even more curious about Qin Hao and Zhan Wu's origins. Where did they come from? That Divine King was the king of the primeval realm's Thunder God race. It was difficult for ordinary people to even meet him. Qin Hao actually said that he knew him. Qin Hao did not continue to explain. His so-called knowing was based on his relationship with Zhan Wu. The Pill Venerate tribe was not familiar with the Thunder God race, but the War God race had a deep relationship with the Thunder God race. The divine king that killed the Sword Emperor could be considered one of Zhang Wu's seniors. However, this had nothing to do with Qin Hao. There were too many incidents of life and death in the Eldritch universe. There were even world-ending wars. Soon, the group arrived at the Seven-Sword Mountain in the Kunlun Sea. In the distance, terrifying collisions frequently sounded. Qin Hao and the others looked up and saw a fierce battle erupting in the void. There were no less than hundreds of Emperor Realm experts fighting. With Heaven Will experts holding the line, the scene could be said to be earth-shattering. It was no less than the commotion caused by the Celestial Mountain. However, along the way, they were not surprised. Even Heaven Wheel experts had died at the hands of Qin Hao. Mere Nirvana Realm and unblemished Void Realm experts could not affect Wuck and the other state of mind. In the past, they might have been frightened. Chapter 1988. The Seven Sword Mountains were called mountains, but in reality, they were just sword islands that were more than 10 meters tall. They were thin and long, like 7 stone swords that pierced out of the sea. They were lined up in a row and stood alone in this region of the sea. There was no other scenery within a radius of hundreds of miles, which made them particularly special. After Qin Hao and the others arrived, they felt a vast and majestic aura of swordsmanship. The area seemed to have become a sword domain of the Great Path, and the pressure suddenly pressed down on them. Such strong swordsmanship. No wonder he is the Emperor of Swords, Illusion Zun praised. Even with his cultivation, being in this sword domain was particularly oppressive. One could only imagine how strong the Emperor of Swords was. Not to mention that these 7 sword peaks only had a trace of the Emperor of Swords' sword left. The ground is indeed extraordinary. This senior is an extraordinary figure. Wuck approved. He felt the pressure from the 7 sword peaks more strongly than Illusion Zun. Qin Hao nodded silently and looked forward. The number of warriors gathered at the Seven Sword Mountains was no less than the Divine Fire Mountain. There were many figures in the void. However, there were only 7 sword peaks, and they were very small. It was impossible for so many people to occupy them at the same time. In fact, each of the 7 sword peaks only had 1 figure on it. 7 people. Qin Hao looked at the 7 figures that were releasing their auras, faintly resonating with the sword peaks. They seemed to be in an epiphany. Whether it was the figures or the sword peaks under their feet, they were all shining with brilliant light. Traces of sword were gushing out from the sword peaks and winding around the figures, strengthening their will. It was as if they had become one with the sword peaks. These 7 people were all in different realms. The strong ones were in the Celestial Wheel realm, and the weak ones were in the Nirvana realm. Obviously, these people had already regarded the sword peaks as their own. It would not be easy to kick them away and comprehend the Emperor of Swords' sword will. Even so, many cultivators were still trying to comprehend from a distance. They stood far away, and their minds were drawn to the 7 sword peaks, trying to comprehend some of the virtues. Among them, the talented cultivators could also resonate with the sword peaks, and faint light of swordsmanship surrounded them. However, comprehending from afar was not as intense as comprehending the sword will on the sword peak. Qin Hao's divine will radiated outwards as he carefully sensed what was in front of him. He discovered that the sword wills contained within the 7 mountain peaks were the same. They were all created by the Sword Emperor, but there were some differences between them. When the flaming patterns appeared in his eye chakra, he saw that the sword peaks seemed to be formed by the Sword Emperor's body. The movements of the sword peaks imprinted on the 7 sword peaks were completely different. 7th style. Qin Hao's face was filled with astonishment as he spoke. The sword wills were the same, created by a single sword. However, this sword strike contained 7 moves. It seemed that this Sword Emperor was very strong. Amazing. Huan Zun looked at Qin Hao. With a single thought, he saw through the true meaning of the ruins. That's right. These 7 sword peaks belong to the same sword, yet they are split into 7 styles. Once we comprehend one of the styles, we will be able to cultivate the Sword Emperor's shocking killing move. Not far away, a young man with a dignified appearance spoke. He had 2 swords on his back and a wine gourd hanging from his waist. Clearly, he was a swordsman who liked to drink. This must be the first time you've heard of the Seven-Sword Mountain. We come from the Great Path Sword Realm. Tens of thousands of swordsmen in the Sword Realm yearn for the Sword Emperor's 1 sword 7 kills and hope to learn a thing or two. Therefore, every time the Kunlun Grand Sea Assembly is held, many people from the Sword Realm will come to the Seven-Sword Mountain to comprehend it, a young man beside him said. The 7 sword peaks contained the 7 styles. It was not a secret. The story of the Sword Emperor was widely spread in the Sword Realm. Almost everyone who came here knew about it. Unfortunately, even if they knew, no one could cultivate the 7 styles of the Sword Peak and perfectly reproduce the ultimate sword. To them, learning a thing or two was already considered lucky. So far, the highest record in the history of the Kunlun Grand Sea Assembly was that someone had comprehended the 5 styles of the Sword Peak. Is it that difficult? Qin Hao asked in surprise. In his view, the 7 styles were clearly imprinted on the sword peaks. It was easy to comprehend. Of course it's difficult. The dignified young man pointed to the front and said, "Do you see that? Every expert who occupies the sword peak has a 1 in a million understanding of sword principle and talent. They have comprehended it for a long time, but no one has succeeded in comprehending one of the 7 styles. In fact, comprehending the sword styles on the sword peak was not as difficult as ascending to heaven. However, comprehending it was one thing, and being able to display the essence of this sword style was another. It was like the same sword technique in the hands of different people. The power displayed will be different." Qin Hao nodded to show that he understood. However, it did not seem difficult for him to master the 7 styles and condense them into one sword to reproduce the Sword Emperor's shocking killing move. Buzz! At this time, a brilliant sword principle divine light suddenly rushed out from one of the sword peaks in front of them. It was like a sword chi that flew out and pierced the sky. The power of the sword essence could be clearly felt by all the warriors present. Someone had successfully comprehended one of the sword styles. So powerful. The young man with a dignified appearance was dumbstruck as he gazed at the peak of one of the sword peaks. There was a woman with an extraordinary bearing standing there, and no matter if it was her appearance or bearing, she was breathtaking. The woman's cultivation was also very impressive. She was surrounded by the light of the 9 planes of martial arts. She was like a goddess, emitting the pressure of the 6 planes of law. Congratulations to 3rd Miss Chu for mastering the Sword Emperor's unique technique. Someone congratulated her. Congratulations. In the area of 7 Sword Mountain, many cultivators congratulated the woman. Obviously, her identity was not simple. "How is it, brother? Are you dumbfounded? However, I advise you to just watch and not have any crooked thoughts. That Miss Chu is a direct descendant of one of the 3 divine paths of the Kunlun continent. Her talent and status are extraordinary." The dignified young man tooted at Qin Hao. People like him, and Qin Hao had no chance. The Chu clan is a divine path family on par with the Lin clan. The illusion elder was shocked. No wonder the woman was accompanied by a heavenly wheel plane cultivator. That was why she occupied a sword peak. "It's SOSO. It can't be compared to my Han," Qin Hao said disapprovingly and rubbed the tip of his nose. Who knew that the 3rd Miss Chu's hearing was amazing? Almost as soon as Qin Hao's voice fell, a pair of beautiful eyes looked over. "How dare you?" An elder beside the 3rd Miss Chu shouted majestically. Immediately, the pressure of the heavenly wheel plane descended. It was about to attack Qin Hao as punishment. "Third uncle, forget it," the 3rd Miss Chu said to the elder. Only then did the elder retract the aura of the heavenly wheel plane. "What did you just say about me?" The 3rd Miss Chu looked over. Although she did not want to use her power to oppress others, there was some justice that she had to demand. She could not allow others to gossip about her. "Oh, I just saw a divine light soaring into the sky. I was deeply shocked by Miss Chu's talent. I saw that Miss Chu was as brilliant as a celestial flower, and her beauty was enough to topple cities. You are indeed a rare beauty. Miss Chu is of noble birth, and her talent is unparalleled." You are far from being comparable to my wife. Alas, I wish I had known Miss Chu earlier. It hurts. Qin Hao hung his head and said in annoyance. Ugh. The young sword cultivator from the sword world almost spat out the wine he had just drunk. He looked at Qin Hao. Shameless. Xiao Han was also so angry that she stomped her foot. She reached out and pinched Qin Hao's waist. Why had she never seen him praise himself like this? Instead, he praised others for being catchy. Wuk silently turned his head away, as if to say, I'm ashamed to be associated with him. Haha, I see that your temperament is not ordinary. You are a slippery person who steers the helm when the wind blows. Third Miss Chu smiled. She knew that Qin Hao was flattering her, but she was still very happy. Which girl did not like to be praised? Third Miss Chu was no exception. I think it's better for us to separate first, Wuk said to Qin Hao. Qin Hao glared at Wuk. Then, he turned to Third Miss Chu and said, Third Miss Chu, why do you think that I'm a slippery person? Is that not the case? Third Miss Chu tilted her head slightly. This is indeed the case. Qin Hao admitted awkwardly, but I was forced by the situation. If I told the truth, I was afraid that I would make Miss Chu unhappy. It's okay. Tell me. Miss Chu said. Do you really want me to say it? Qin Hao asked. Say it. Miss Chu said heavily. She wanted to see what this silver-haired man could say. The Sword Emperor's 7 forms in one sword is not difficult. It's just that they haven't met a true genius of the Sword Dao. Miss Chu, you didn't hear wrongly. I think that your talent is very mediocre. At least, you're not as good as this brother beside me. Qin Hao pushed Wuk out. You. Third Miss Chu's face turned cold when she heard this. It's sad to have a bad friend in life. Wuk shook his head helplessly. Why? You don't believe me? Or you can't accept the fact that someone else is better than you? Qin Hao said with a smile. Do you want to try? Okay, how do you want to try? Miss Chu's chest heaved up and down. She was very depressed because of this silver-haired man. Miss, give up your sword and let my brother go. He can comprehend the Sword Emperor's 7 forms in half an hour. Qin Hao said loudly. This was his goal. No matter which sword peak it was, he would offend people. It was better to use another method. He could cultivate the Sword Emperor's secret technique without provoking other forces. Ha ha ha! All the warriors in the 7 Sword Mountains laughed. Comprehend the Sword Emperor's 7 forms in half an hour? They had been standing here for half a day. Some of them had even participated in the last Sword Emperor's 7 forms in half an hour. Anyone who could comprehend the Sword Emperor's 7 forms in half an hour would be a 1 in a million sword genius. There were hundreds of continents and tens of thousands of cultivators gathered here. There were very few people who could comprehend the Sword Emperor's 7 forms. The third Miss Chu of Kunlun could comprehend the Sword Emperor's 7 forms in half a day. She could be called a monster. This silver-haired young man dared to say such arrogant words. Not only did he look down on third Miss Chu, but he also said that he could comprehend the Sword Emperor's 7 forms in half an hour. According to what he said, he could comprehend all the Sword Emperor's 7 sword peaks in 6 hours and perfectly recreate the Sword Emperor's secret technique. How arrogant! How ridiculous! Whether it's true or not, this person can occupy one of the peaks. Heart palpitations, how vicious! The sharp-eyed people pointed at Qin Hao. Since first Miss Chu had solved the Sword Emperor's 7 forms, she naturally had to leave. Once she left, many people would fight for a spot. It was unknown who would occupy the sword peak in the end. Now, after being provoked by this silver-haired young man, third Miss Chu would definitely give up the sword peak in a fit of pique. Who would dare to fight for the sword peak that Kunlun's Chu clan gave up? Okay, just as the others had guessed, third Miss Chu insisted and agreed. She pointed to Show Wuk and shouted, "Come here. Let me see how powerful you are." Half an hour? Okay. If he could solve the Sword Emperor's 7 forms in half an hour, Chuning would admit defeat and admit that she was inferior. However, if he couldn't solve the Sword Emperor's 7 forms, this matter wouldn't be settled so easily. Okay. Wuk leaped into the air. As soon as he moved, third Mischu immediately flew away. Immediately, Wuk occupied one of the 7 peaks. Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but my friend was right. In my opinion, your talent is mediocre and not worthy of praise. Wuk said to Chu Ning. Chu Ning was so angry that her face turned crimson. Anger rose in her belly. She gritted her teeth and said, "Fine. If you can't solve the Sword Emperor's 7 forms in half an hour, I'll take an arm from each of you." This was the price for speaking boldly. Chapter 1989. 1 arm per person. Qin Hao's group of 5 had 5 arms left. Even the heavenly wheel could not be repaired. The Chu clan had the ability to do so. Wuk did not say anything more. Since the Chu clan's third miss was willing to give up her position, he was too embarrassed to bargain with her. At this moment, he stood on top of the sword peak. Sword will filled his body, enveloping the sword all below him. It began to penetrate into the sword will left behind by the Sword Emperor. This scene caused many cultivators to look at Wuk. He looked quite serious, but to break the sword technique in less than half an hour. How presumptuous was his tone? What did he think of everyone present? Many people were waiting to see this severed arm show. Arrogance needed to be taught a lesson. The illusion elder also looked at Wuk with a particularly serious expression. According to Qin Hao, his brother's talent was extraordinary. In terms of swordsmanship alone, Qin Hao thought that Wuk was second. There was absolutely no first in the untainted land. It was obvious how arrogant this evaluation was. It could be said that he looked down on everyone. The illusion elder had not known Wuk for long, so he did not know much about him. However, he trusted Qin Hao. What happened to Qin Hao during this time made the illusion elder admire him more and more. Therefore, he was not worried that Wuk could not break it. On the contrary, he was full of expectations. On the sword isle, Wuk released his sword will. Soon, the sword peak also reacted. Rays of swordsmanship flew out and wrapped around Wuk's body. They seemed to merge into his sword will. The light became more and more brilliant, and the sound of swords whistling through the air became louder and louder. Many cultivators could not help but change their expressions. It was actually so fast. In less than half an hour, the young man had merged with the sword will of the sword peak. Talent. At this time, many people quietly looked at the Chu clan's third Mississippi. Their gazes seemed to be suspicious of something. After all, on the same sword isle, the others had merged with the sword will in less than half an hour. But the Chu clan's third miss had comprehended it for half a day. Chu Ning's expression did not look good. Was it so exaggerated? So fast? It had only been a few breaths. However, the fusion of the 2 sword intents was easy, but comprehending the sword moves from the sword intents was even more difficult. She did not believe that Wuk could solve it within the time it took for an incense stick to burn. It was too outrageous. It was a pity that things often went against one's wishes. The sword light on Wuk's body became more and more dazzling. It was as if he had become one with the sword peak. Be it man or stone, his aura was perfectly integrated. There were no gaps in the flashing brilliance. Vaguely, it seemed to have condensed into a sword light that was about to shoot up into the sky. This scene stunned the cultivators of the 7 Sword Mountain. The cultivators who were comprehending on the other sword peaks were also startled, and they all revealed strange expressions. Wuk was not pretending. His sword intent had indeed merged perfectly with the Sword Emperor's sword intent, as if they were of the same origin. The sword peaks had already been moved by his will. One could imagine how terrifying this sword cultivator's comprehension ability was. Unraveling this move was definitely not a joke. At the thought of this, the experts standing on the other 6 sword peaks felt their cheeks burning. They were deeply hurt. They had been meditating here for a long time. Except for the Chu family's third miss, no one else had comprehended anything. However, this young sword cultivator who had just arrived did not even take half an incense stick's time. A shadow of a divine sword appeared on Wuk's body. Strong divine light enveloped him, and the entire sword island began to shake. Then, Wuk's mind moved, and the divine sword shadow that shrouded him turned into a beam of dazzling divine light that shot up into the sky. It was exactly the same as when the Chu family's third miss comprehended the sword move. The sky shook. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded. They looked at the young man who was shining with divine light and was full of sword light particles. They were all speechless for a moment. They were all stunned. I was lucky to have solved it. Thank you for letting me win. Wuk cupped his hands and smiled at the Chu family's third Mississippi. He had solved the move. Chu Ning's beautiful eyes widened. She was speechless. Miss Chu, do you want to test it yourself? Wuk asked sincerely. No need. Chu Ning came back to her senses and said coldly. They had solved the strange phenomenon on the sword peaks together. If she doubted Shou Wuk, wouldn't it mean that she doubted herself? Chu Ning could tell whether it was true or not. However, she felt a little uncomfortable. How did you do it? She asked. I'm not too sure. I chanted the name of Senior Sword Emperor and prayed sincerely. I comprehended it in a daze. Wuk said with a smile. Nonsense. Chu Ning snorted angrily. Shameless. Some old sword cultivators couldn't stand it and pointed at Shou Wuk. If he could successfully comprehend the shocking sword move by chanting the name of Sword Emperor, why didn't they succeed in a daze? Sigh. It seems that I'm really old. I can't keep up with the pace of the young. An old man, standing on the sword peak next to Wuk, shook his head and sighed. He had participated in the Two Realms Kunlun Sea meet and comprehended one of the 7 sword moves. Today, he came here with the hope of comprehending another move. In the end, he saw such a scene. Cough, cough. Senior, don't sigh. I feel that although the sword intent of the 7 peaks is the same, the sword principles contained in it are different. Perhaps the sword peak under your feet is not suitable for you to cultivate. Why don't you change places with my brother? Maybe you can comprehend another move? Qin Hao shouted in a clear voice. Well, it makes sense. Old man feels the same. The old man nodded and seemed to have an epiphany. After all, he had comprehended a move in the last meeting. This time he shouldn't fail. He looked at Wuk and shouted, Come on, young man, let's change places. Okay. Wuk couldn't ask for more. Whoosh, whoosh. The 2 figures crossed each other in extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, they changed places and swapped sword peaks. Hey, shouldn't you ask me first? Chu Ning was anxious. She had occupied the sword peak first. Wuk closed his eyes and ignored Chu Ning. Since they had already swapped, she could ask the old man for a place. It had nothing to do with him. Third miss, I'll borrow this peak. When old man comprehends a sword move, I'll return it immediately. The old man said coldly. As he spoke, he secretly released the light of his sky wheel, as if to say, I'm not afraid of the Chu clan in Kunlun. Young Mississippi, the elder next to Chu Ning, looked embarrassed. He was the only one accompanying Chu Ning on this trip to the Kunlun Sea. The other party's cultivation was similar to his. If they had a conflict, it wouldn't be a good thing. Forget it, Chu Ning said angrily. She knew that her third uncle was not afraid of being injured. If he was injured, he wouldn't be able to protect her. Virum. At this moment, the sword peak where Wuk was standing was filled with rolling sword light. The shadow of a divine sword appeared above his head again. The divine light was dazzling. In the next moment, tens of thousands of sword chi broke through the air. A sword might of the great path fell and was absorbed into Wuk's will. He had solved another move. This is too fast. What monster? Who are they? If the first successful solution was a fluke, then the second one, caused by Wuk, completely ignited the commotion of the 7-sword mountain, making him the absolute focus. Seeing this, the shock in Chu Ning's eyes turned into shock. In less than half an hour, he had solved 2 sword moves in a row. Who on earth was this young man? See, I was right. If we switch places, maybe you will be able to comprehend it. Qin Hao said with a smile. His voice seemed to be bewitching. Unfortunately, the one who had comprehended it was Wuk and not the elder. No one knew what the elder was feeling at this moment. Brother, let's switch places? Wuk said to the cultivator who occupied the 3rd peak. It was a strong man. All right. The man nodded and stepped on the ground. The powerful force of his foot made the sword peak sink slightly. His body was like a heavy sword, drawing a bright light as he flew in the direction of Wuk. Wuck took advantage of the opportunity to leave and cross with the other. Then, they both landed and began to comprehend. Not long after, the third shadow of a divine sword appeared, still at Wuck's position. It broke through the clouds and whistled in the void. The sword will was integrated by Wuck and refined into the will of the Great Path. He saw the third move. Master, why is your complexion so bad? Let's go. What's 7 kills and 1 sword? I think the Sword Emperor is just an undeserved reputation. His ultimate move was easily solved. It's just a crappy move. Humph! A middle-aged cultivator who stood on the 4th peak said angrily. He turned and left the 7-sword mountain. His disciple was stunned for a few seconds. Master had clearly said that the Sword Emperor was an unparalleled almighty in the sword world. How did he suddenly become an undeserving disciple? Master's change in attitude was too fast. That person secretly glanced at Wu Kei and instantly understood why his master had left. Most likely, he felt embarrassed. After all, he had spent so much time trying to comprehend the 4th sword technique, and yet he had gained nothing. While Qin Wentian had easily deciphered the 3 sword techniques, they were both sword cultivators. The difference in talent. The moment the powerful cultivator who occupied the 4th peak left, Wu Kei immediately flew over and landed on the 4th peak, continuing to try to comprehend the sword techniques. For a moment, everyone didn't know what to do with the empty 3rd peak. However, if they didn't move, they felt that it would be a pity. If they went there and couldn't gain any enlightenment, wouldn't that be a disgrace? Sword cultivators were prideful and prideful. Not long after, the 4th divine sword phantom appeared and flew above Wuck's head. He solved the 4th move of the 7-sword mountain and was only 1 peak away from the highest record. Witnessing this scene, the cultivators were a little numb. Senior, let's change? Wuck said to the cultivator of the 5th peak. Get lost. On the 5th peak, a gloomy middle-aged man in black stood. Perhaps he was jealous of Wuck's ability, so he shouted in public. Wuck, stay on the 4th peak and continue comprehending. Qin Hao shouted and deliberately glanced at the gloomy middle-aged man on the 5th peak. Wuck understood Qin Hao's idea and nodded. Then his consciousness swept out and shrouded the 5th peak. Standing on the sword peak to comprehend naturally gave one an advantage, but it was not necessary. There were so many cultivators present, and many of them could resonate with the sword peak from a distance. At most, it would consume more mind power, but it was not as strong as standing on the sword peak. He, the gloomy middle-aged man, looked at Wuck. How dare he sweep his consciousness towards him and try to comprehend the 5th move? Is he deliberately making things difficult for me? I won't allow it. Buzz. A wave of black swordway radiance burst forth like a swarm of locusts, densely covering the 4th peak's flawless. Since he couldn't comprehend the Sword Emperor's unique skill, the gloomy middle-aged man wouldn't let Wuck get it. However, at this moment, a glaring divine sword radiance radiated from the front. The gloomy middle-aged man felt the earth-shattering pressure of the sword essence and looked forward in shock. He saw Qin Hao stretching out his arms, and 4 divine sword phantoms appeared beside him. The aura was exactly the same as the previous 4 sword peaks. Wuck wasn't the only one. During this period of time, no one knew that Qin Hao had also comprehended the 4th move. Moreover, he comprehended it from a distance and didn't occupy the sword peak. At this moment, the gloomy middle-aged man felt as if his gallbladder was about to split open. His shocked eyes were mixed with a trace of horror. The silver-haired young man with a smile on his face was actually more ruthless than Wuck. Chapter 1990. Many warriors were surprised as they looked at the 4 beams of divine light hanging around Qin Hao in disbelief. Go! Qin Hao spat out a cold voice. The 4 beams of sword light pierced through the air at the same speed. They overlapped and intertwined midway, condensing into a beam of dazzling divine light. The sword power filled the sky as it whizzed through the area between the 4th and 5th peaks. In an instant, the black sword current pressing down on Wuck was forcefully dispersed. It was split into 2 and suddenly collapsed. The gloomy middle-aged man's expression trembled. He pointed at the void, and the black sword chi flowing around his body condensed into a black divine sword, piercing toward Qin Hao. A mere third-order nirvana realm dared to ruin his plan? At this time, the beam of divine light that flew between the fourth and fifth peaks turned back at an unparalleled speed. It caught up with the black divine sword in the blink of an eye and collided violently. Boom! A trembling sound spread. The seven sword peaks shook at the same time, and the sea water shook. The gloomy middle-aged man, standing on the fifth peak, felt a strong sword intent pressing down on him. In an instant, he felt as if he had been hit by four swords. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression changed drastically, and he fled into the distance. The Sword Emperor's unique skill was indeed worthy of its reputation. Although Qin Hao had only mastered 4 moves, its power was not to be underestimated. Faintly, he felt that Qin Hao's cultivation was not only third-order Nirvana realm. Otherwise, with his 8th-order strength, no matter how powerful the Sword Emperor's unique skill was, how could he be injured by the silver-haired young man? You want to kill me? You're still too inexperienced. The gloomy middle-aged man turned back and said. His figure escaped into the void, and his aura disappeared directly. It seemed that this person had a special ability to cross the great Tao of space. Qin Hao was slightly surprised. He spread out his divine sense and locked onto the position of the fleeing man. The great void sword whistled, and the Sword Emperor's 4 moves merged into it. Swoosh! Before the crowd could see how the divine sword flew out, a shrill scream came from afar. The Nirvana realm Tao of the gloomy middle-aged man disappeared. This! The sword cultivators from all walks of life were shocked. Space sword controlling technique? So powerful, so ruthless. A third-order Nirvana realm expert killed an 8th-order Nirvana realm expert that was close to godhood. Qin Hao was unperturbed. As the great void sword returned, the sword radiance retracted into his body. He flew directly to the 5th peak, landed on it, and sank into meditation. The gloomy middle-aged man was jealous of Wuck's ability and wanted to kill him. In that case, why should Qin Hao show mercy? Senior Sword Emperor's ultimate technique is truly tyrannical. An old man said, a third-order Nirvana realm cultivator killing an 8th-order Nirvana realm cultivator was an unbelievable feat. That's not all. The weapon he used at the end seemed to be a powerful divine weapon. Another person said, he sensed that if it wasn't for the divine weapon's tyrannical power, it wouldn't have been able to kill an 8th-level Nirvana so easily. That was an expert close to a deity. Many people pointed out that it was reasonable to rely on a divine weapon to kill an 8th-tier warrior, but they couldn't overlook Qin Hao's own ability. His talent was extremely strong. Otherwise, how could he comprehend the 4 peaks sword styles from afar? What a monster! Buzz! At that moment, a sword sound was heard in the void. Everyone looked up and saw Qin Hao, who was occupying the gloomy middle-aged man's position on the 5th peak. His body was surrounded by endless sword radiance, and his temperament was like that of a celestial being. Above him, a sword radiance phantom slowly formed, filled with the Sword Emperor's sword will. The 5th move of the sword peak has been solved. Countless swordsmen gasped for breath. He solved it so quickly, no less than the expressionless young man. He was indeed another monster. Look over there. Someone pointed at Wuck, who was standing on the 4th peak. At that moment, a divine sword phantom also appeared above Wuck's head. The pressure it emitted was exactly the same as that of the 5th peak, where Qin Hao was. Even the shape of the phantom overlapped perfectly, as if it had been carved out. In an instant, Qin Hao and Wuck's wills moved, and 2 divine sword radiance broke through the sky at the same time. The 2 swords hummed together, and the sacred sword's sound resounded in the sky. This scene deeply shocked countless swordsmen. They solved the 5th move of the Sword Emperor at the same time, tying the record of the 7-sword mountain. I'm ashamed. The swordsman from the sword world, who had a wine gourd hanging on his waist, was ashamed. He blushed when he thought of what he had said to Qin Hao before. He and Qin Hao are not the same kind of people at all. The difference was too great. You saw the fifth move of the Sword Emperor in one go. That's amazing. The third miss of the Chu family stared at Qin Hao with her beautiful eyes. She suddenly felt that Qin Hao's silver hair and strong facial features were simply too handsome. At that moment, she no longer remembered that she was a disciple who was on the lookout. They are indeed amazing. I wonder which world they are from. Miss, carefully sense it. Is the aura of the silver-haired young man and the expressionless young man intertwined? Both of their wills seem to be connected. I guess that they have been secretly passing on sword will to each other, instilling what they have comprehended from the sword peak to each other. Uncle Chu said, if that was not the case, Qin Hao would not have been able to comprehend the fourth move so quickly. Moreover, he did not have the advantage of the sword peak. Perhaps Uncle Chu's guess was wrong. In fact, he was not sure whether Wuk had passed on the sword will to Qin Hao, or whether Qin Hao had secretly guided Showuk to comprehend the sword peak. However, there was one thing that was certain. Both of their talents in the way of the sword were rare and monstrous. The third miss of the Chu family did not seem to have heard Uncle Chu's words. She looked at Qin Hao with a smile and suddenly had a unique idea. He is indeed a genius secretly nurtured by Master. His talent is not inferior to mine. He is qualified to be my junior brother. Among the countless people, there was a group of special people standing in a place. They emitted an extremely sharp aura, as if they were the incarnations of swords. At this moment, in front of this group of special swordsmen, Lu Qiu, who stood out among the crowd, looked at Qin Hao and secretly nodded, praising him in his heart. Whether it was breaking the sword move or killing the gloomy middle-aged man, Qin Hao's performance was outstanding. Lu Qiu admired him. Only such a genius was worthy of being his junior brother. Of course, it was not just Qin Hao. Showuk was also outstanding. Lu Qiu had not met such an outstanding swordsman in the great Path Sword realm for a long time. This trip was not in vain. Young master, time waits for no man. If you don't act now, the one sword's 7 kills will fall into the hands of others. Someone behind Lu Qiu reminded him. The Sword Emperor was an expert revered by all 3 great sword realms. Even the 3 divine masters admired his way of the sword. Unfortunately, the Sword Emperor was unlucky and had fallen early. Otherwise, the great Path Sword realm might open up another realm, and the Sword Emperor would become the 4th divine master of the way of the sword. Today, Lu Qiu was here under orders to take the one sword's 7 kills and prove himself to his father. However, the divine guards under Divine Master Lu did not expect that Li Chuji would also come to the 7-sword mountain and break the sword move of the 5 peaks in one go. Based on his performance, it was very likely that he would break 2 more peaks and gather all 7 sword moves to recreate the one sword's 7 kills. It was not just Qin Hao. Even the swordsman beside him was extremely talented. This made the divine guards behind Lu Qiu very worried. The Sword Emperor's ultimate skill must not fall into the hands of Li Chuji. Brother Lu, hurry up and act, Dong Wang said, gritting his teeth. His eyes were filled with deep hatred as he looked at Qin Hao. How could he forget what had happened in the Phantom Continent? Li Chusin had caused him to lose his home and become someone else's servant as soon as he fell from grace. Huff. Lu Qiu took a deep breath and stepped into the void, walking toward one of the sword peaks. He had no hostility toward Qin Hao. On the contrary, he admired him. However, he could not let his father down because of this. He must bring the one sword 7 kills back to Rikujinji. At this time, the 7 sword peaks were quiet. Everyone was immersed in meditation. Qin Hao and Wuk occupied one of the peaks and were also meditating. They did not attack the 6th and 7th peaks. They could communicate with the sword wills of the other 2 peaks and comprehend the sword moves. Moreover, the experts of the other 2 peaks did not forbid them from using their sword wills. The 7 peaks were peaceful. Lu Qiu was walking toward the 7th peak. On the 7th sword peak, a young man in yellow clothes in his 30s stood. He exuded a noble aura. He seemed to have noticed Lu Qiu's arrival and looked over. At this moment, The space of the seventh peak seemed to have become still. Lucio and the young man in yellow clothes burst forth with Tianlun radiance at the same time. Strong particles of the laws rolled endlessly, and a sword condensed in front of each of them. When these two swords were born, the sound of the swords in the void was deafening and extremely intense. All the warriors near the seven sword peaks had their swords trembling. The frequency of the trembling seemed to be about to collapse. The sword wills released by the warriors were all interrupted, and they could not continue to perceive the seven sword peaks. Even Qin, Hao, and Wuk, who were immersed in meditation, were the same. Their spiritual souls were tingling intensely, as if they were being pierced by countless sharp swords. They could not help but look at Lucio and the young man in yellow. Lucio and the young man in yellow clothes seemed to know each other. They actually attacked at the same time with great tacit understanding. Immediately, the divine swords in front of them were wrapped in intense light particles and suddenly collided. At this moment, the light particles in the sky turned into a turbulent aftershock that swept out. All the swordsmen in the area of the seven sword peaks were thrown more than 1,000 feet away. They could not stop at all. Even the Tianlun experts could not withstand it. Crack! The divine sword glowing with yellow light was shattered. The young man in yellow clothes, standing at the seventh peak, suddenly turned pale. A hot stream was about to flow out from his throat, but he forcefully swallowed it back. "The seventh peak is yours," the young man in yellow clothes said to Lucio. Lucio nodded. He did not say anything modest, because there was no need. Then, the young man in yellow clothes stepped on the tip of his foot and left the seventh peak. Without any reluctance, he flew toward the void in the distance. As soon as he left, about hundreds of swordsmen near the seven sword peaks left at the same time and chased in the direction of the young man in yellow clothes. The battle formation was extremely spectacular. What a big battle formation! Wuk was surprised. The swordsmen chasing the young man in yellow clothes were not mediocre. It could be seen that the young man in yellow clothes was an extremely important figure in a big world. Celestial grade Tianlun. Qin Hao looked at Lucio and felt a slight ripple in his heart. Both Lucio and the young man in yellow clothes had celestial grade Tianlun that surpassed the great Tianlun, except for the Tianlun. They were almost perfect. They were also known as full Tianlun in the untainted universe. They were extraordinary existences comparable to the divine master level. Obviously, both Lucio and the young man in yellow clothes had the chance to become divine masters in big worlds in the future. They had the same status as Dongwang. The sword power of these two people is really strong. Wuk's face was bitter. The moment the two swords met, if not for Qin Hao's secret protection, he would have been sent flying from the fourth peak. Currently, he could not block a single sword strike from the two people. They did not even bother to use their swords. "Don't worry and meditate," Qin Hao transmitted his voice. Seeing that Lucio had chased away the young man in yellow clothes and stepped on the seventh peak, it seemed that something was wrong. With Qin Hao's knowledge, he could conclude that Lucio had the ability to completely break the sword style of the seventh peak. Moreover, the seven sword peaks was not as simple as it seemed. The one sword's 7 kills would only fall into the hands of one person in the end. They did not have much time left. Lucio's arrival brought great pressure to Qin Hao and Wuk. Chapter 1991. The sixth prince of the true dragon sword realm is indeed as talented as the rumors say. Unfortunately, he was still defeated by our young master. The leader of the 3 major sword realms of this generation is none other than Rikugenji. As Lucio defeated the young man in yellow and stepped onto the seventh peak, the cultivators of Rikugenji smiled and praised him. Higashua looked at Lucio with envy and admiration. He hated that he wasn't the one who defeated the young man in yellow and stepped onto the seventh peak. If he had Lucio's ability, he would be famous in the Dongwang realm. Lucio stepped onto the seventh peak and released his divine will. The light was dazzling, and his aura added even more pressure to the sword domain. Wisps of sword aura flew out from the sword island and gathered around Lucio in a frenzy. His aura was majestic, and soon a shadow of a divine sword appeared above his head, becoming clearer and clearer. Then, the loud sound of the sword resounded. A beam of divine light shot up to the sky and shook the world. It came from his seventh peak. Lucio had broken the sixth move. What a terrifying talent in Sword Dao. He's faster than the silver-haired man and the cold-faced young man. Many people were shocked. The swordsman who had a wine gourd hanging from his waist looked at Lucio with a hint of fear in his eyes. The hand that held the wine gourd was trembling. He had witnessed the defeat of the yellow-robed youth with his own eyes and felt Lucio's sword will. This swordsman from the divine realm of the Great Path, Sword Realm, vaguely recognized Lucio's identity. He was the Lord of Rikugenji and the son of Divine Lord Lu. Lucio's talent was the best in Rikugenji. He was the #1 genius of the generation, and no one could be compared to him. In the 3 major sword realms, Lucio's strength and talent were the best of all the princes of the 3 divine lords. His fame had long surpassed Rikugenji and spread to the 3 major sword realms. Thousands of sword cultivators worshipped Lucio. Today, they were fortunate enough to see his true appearance. It was truly shocking and ecstatic. What a genius of the divine way. It seems like Qin Hao and Wuk have encountered a formidable opponent that is hard to come by in 1,000 years. Senior Sword Emperor's 1 sword 7 kills will definitely reappear among these 3. Illusion Elder said. Xiaohan was faintly nervous. Other than Wuk, Luciodi was indeed the person with the strongest swordsmanship she had ever seen. In the span of a few breaths, Luciodi had broken through a move without any hindrance. It was as if the supreme art left behind by the Sword Emperor was waiting for Luciodi to take. At this moment, Lucio did not stop comprehending the 7th peak's sword style. His divine will swept out and split into 6 different streams, each of them heading towards the other 6 peaks. For a moment, the 6 sword peaks trembled and resonated with Lucio's divine will. Strands of light of the sword flew from the 6 positions toward Lucio, wrapping around his body and merging into his celestial wheel, making him shine with boundless light and extremely dazzling. Was he going to break the other 6 moves at the same time? Everyone's hearts trembled. In the past 10,000 years, many heroes had come to the 7-Sword Mountain to comprehend the swordsmanship at the Kunlun Sea Grand Meet. It was lucky to be able to comprehend 1 move at a time. The highest record was only 5 moves, and they had all comprehended them one by one. Including Qin Hao and Wuk, they had also solved the moves one by one, which was the only way to tie the record. No one was like Lucio, who covered the 7 peaks with his will and solved all 7 moves at the same time, especially when they saw the light of the divine swords appearing on both sides of his body. The phantoms slowly formed one by one. After counting carefully, there were actually 6 phantoms that were about to break through the air around him. At this moment, the cultivators of the 7-Sword Mountain were about to go crazy. Their eyes were burning with passion. They were filled with admiration, as if they were seeing Lucio as a god. Ha ha ha, as expected of our young master. Awesome. Even our master Lu God couldn't have this ability at this age. The overlords of Rikugenji snickered. From this moment on, they firmly believed that Lucio would be the successor of God Lu. No other prince would be able to compete with him. Higashiwa's heart was also in turmoil. He had known that Lucio was unparalleled, but after seeing it with his own eyes, he was even more powerful than he had imagined. He had solved the 7 peaks with a thought. If I were Lucio, Lord Dongwon would also have to treat me seriously. Higashiwa clenched his fists. They had the same blood of the Lu family, but why didn't he have 1/10 of Lucio's talent? Why was it so unfair? At this moment, the sword will of the Great Path permeated the entire 7-Sword Mountain. The light that radiated from each sword peak was extremely intense. Surging sword currents all converged towards Lucio. Vaguely, there seemed to be a mighty heavenly might descending from the sky, suppressing everyone. Even the will of Kunlun was alarmed by the vision of the 7-Sword Mountain. There's no time. Qin Hao transmitted his voice to Wuk. If you can't hold on, give up. Wuk nodded. Lucio had solved the 7 peaks sword style. If Qin Hao wasn't there, the word basically could be removed. Lucio would definitely be able to solve the Sword Emperor's 7 kills. Unfortunately, there was also Qin Hao. Wuk knew Qin Hao very well. In terms of swordsmanship, he was indeed not as good as Lucio, but he was definitely better than Qin Hao. Qin Hao had the power of the primitive realm and could also solve the 7 peaks sword style. It was just a matter of who was faster between him and Lucio. When that time came, a battle between the two was inevitable. When that time came, Wuk couldn't stay here. It was impossible even if he wanted to. His cultivation was too weak. He wasn't qualified. Buzz, 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 as the sword peaks shook more and more violently, as if something was about to fly out. The overflowing sword power in this area was heavy and unbearable. Many cultivators couldn't bear it and retreated. At this time, the old man occupied the first peak and had yet to comprehend the sword style. The brawny man occupied the second peak. The third peak was empty. No one dared to go up. Wuk occupied the fourth peak. Qin Hao occupied the fifth peak. On the sixth peak, there was a divine powerhouse who had created the sky wheel. Lucio occupied the seventh peak. Swordwell rumbled on the 7 sword peaks. Everyone felt great pressure from Lucio. They had a premonition that the 1 sword 7 kills was about to appear. However, the sky wheel aura raging on the sword peaks became more and more terrifying. Although the divine will didn't hurt anyone, everyone except Lucio felt like their souls were riddled with holes. It was gradually unbearable. Retreat. The old man of the first peak was the first to leave. When he stood up, his long robe made a chi-chi sound. Many invisible marks were cut by the sword chi. Immediately, shreds of cloth flew everywhere. Qin Hao Wuk, the divine powerhouse of the sixth peak, and the brawny man were still persisting. They were unwilling to give up. It's not too late to retreat now. Otherwise, it will be difficult for me to control my power later. You should think about the consequences clearly. Lucio said indifferently. It was like the sound of a sword vibrating in their ears. The brawny man gritted his teeth and glared at Lucio fiercely. Then, he retreated from the second peak and left this sword domain. As a sky wheel powerhouse, he was very clear that Lucio's immortal great sky wheel was enough to crush him. He couldn't win at all. Fellow Taoist, I'm the goddess of the immortal Grove World's green field immortal sect. Can you give face to my divine master? Back down. Lucio shouted. Light shot out from her eyes and pierced towards the sixth peak. It was like a divine sword stabbing towards the sky wheel goddess who spoke. When this divine powerhouse felt the power of Lucio's sword intent, her expression couldn't help but change drastically. She lost her footing and fell from the sixth peak without a care for her image. Her figure escaped in a sorry state. In an instant, many immortal Grove world powerhouses outside were indignant and erupted with their auras. But as the Rikujinji powerhouse blocked in front of them, the furious immortal Grove world people immediately fell silent. Don't be nervous. I still have some time. I can wait for you guys to comprehend the 6th and 7th moves. On the 7 peaks, only Lucio, Qin Hao, and Wuk were left. At this moment, Lucio spoke to Qin Hao with a kind expression. This caused Qin Hao to reveal a strange expression. Lucio could wait for them. Why'd you do this? That green leaf, immortal sect goddess, didn't even have the chance to ask. Before she finished speaking, she was directly blasted down by Lucio. Now, Lucio was not in a hurry. She still had to wait for Qin Hao and Wuk to comprehend the remaining 2 sword moves. The difference in how she treated people seemed to be very big. The Rikujinji powerhouses looked over in astonishment. They naturally didn't doubt that the son of the Divine Master could obtain the Sword Emperor's secret art as easily as taking something out of his pocket. But why did he give Li Chuji and his companion a chance? Higashiwa was also very puzzled. No need. Wuk said indifferently. After speaking, he left the 4th peak and flew towards the Illusion Elder. He was the pride of the southern region sword sect of the Divine Wilderness Continent. Why did he need others to give him a chance? He didn't need Lu Qiu's charity. Moreover, Lu Qiu might not be able to obtain the Sword Emperor's secret art as she wished. Now, there's only us left. 7 moves, spirit transformation. You and I know it. Let's do it. Qin Hao said to Lu Qiu. Lu Qiu was stunned for a moment and nodded lightly. She secretly thought that her little junior brother and that companion were both very arrogant people. She didn't want to be looked down upon by him. Interesting. Lu Qiu smiled. Only this kind of person was worthy of being the disciple of the martial god and his junior brother. She said, okay. He knew the 7 moves spirit transformation, and so did Qin Hao. If they wanted to reproduce the one sword 7 kills, they had to first obtain the 7 peaks sword spirits and merge them into one sword. Since Qin Hao had seen through the mystery of the 7 peaks, it was equivalent to telling Lu Qiu that he had the ability to compete for it. Buzz. 2 majestic sword wheels exploded, and the brilliant light of the precepts covered the 7 peaks. Qin Hao and Lu Qiu attacked at the same time. Qin Hao's divine will entered the sword peak below him, and the perfect celestial wheel in his body secretly rotated. A powerful force firmly grasped the sword peak like an invisible giant hand. Then, monstrous divine power rose, and a beam of transparent sword spirit light broke out of the rock. As the 5th peak collapsed, it floated beside him. Then, the 4th peak that Wuk had occupied earlier also collapsed. A beam of light flew out and turned into the 2nd sword spirit, which floated to the right of Qin Hao. What's that? Many cultivators outside the field were shocked. A sword spirit born from the sword peak? The Sword Emperor's unique skill had been passed down for tens of thousands of years. Could it be that the sword will had turned into a spirit and was hidden in the sword peak? Boom! With another scream, the 7th peak collapsed, and a beam of transparent sword spirit flew out and floated beside Lu Qiu. He looked next door and pressed his palm into the void. Boom! The 6th peak exploded, and the sword spirit flew out and returned to Lu Qiu's side. Qin Hao and Lu Qiu each had 2 sword spirits. In the next moment, the 2 of them attacked again. The 3rd peak and the 2nd peak shattered at the same time. 2 beams of light broke out of the rock, one on the left and one on the right. One flew towards Qin Hao, and the other rushed towards Lu Qiu. 6 sword spirits. The Sword Emperor's sword will has really turned into a sword spirit. There's only one left. Everyone held their breath, and their hearts thumped wildly. At this moment, Qin Hao and Lu Qiu, who were standing in front of them, had become the absolute focus. Who would have thought that the Sword Emperor's sword would turn into a sword spirit and hide in the 7 Sword Mountain? Now that the sword spirits had appeared, if they were combined into one sword, the extraordinary sword technique of killing 7 people with one slash would definitely be reproduced. Greed, envy, jealousy. Countless cultivators' expressions changed. Who didn't want to take the 7 sword spirits for themselves? They would definitely make an earth-shattering sword. There was no need to comprehend it, because it was engraved in the essence of the sword spirits. Unfortunately, Lu Qiu alone was enough to make all the overlords present hesitate. The power of the deity grade, heavenly wheel, was obvious just by looking at the divine masters of the divine realms. At this moment, many people also felt sorry for Qin Hao. Although he was extremely talented and had comprehended the 5 moves of the sword peak with a cold-faced young man, Lu Qiu was an insurmountable mountain. The last sword spirit belonged to Lu Qiu. Even the 3 sword spirits that Qin Hao currently had would be taken by Lu Qiu. How sad. How pitiful. Chapter 1992. Qin Hao and Lu Qiu stared at the 6th peak at the same time and attacked at the same time. The sword spirit flew out and was pulled by the 2 divine wills. It suddenly approached Qin Hao and then flew to Lu Qiu. They were in a stalemate. No wonder. Lu Qiu saw Qin Hao's level and gave up. The sword spirit of the 6th peak flew to Qin Hao, and the 3 sword spirits around him also flew over. Higashua didn't understand and hated Qin Hao even more. A strange look appeared in Qin Hao's eyes. Why did he give up the sword spirit? He didn't think too much about it, and combined the 7 stances into one sword. Qin Hao pointed out with his sword finger, and a beam of sword light broke through the air. It seemed to contain 7 figures. With a loud boom, other than the sword peak Qin Hao was standing on, the other 6 sword peaks were destroyed. Thank you, Qin Hao said to Lu Qiu. A gentleman should help others. We'll see each other again. Lu Qiu said and left. In Higashiwa's mind, the biggest tragedy of a genius who joined Lin Xian and was ready to cause trouble was that he was born at the wrong time and his talent was reduced to a foil for others. Everyone thought that Qin Hao was just a foil for Lu Qiu, as if his amazing performance before was to help Lu Qiu. How could a Nirvana realm cultivator compete with Tianluan? No one thought that Qin Hao would win. Higashiwa felt extremely happy. No matter how talentedly Chuji was, he could communicate with the statue of the Divine Master, activate the power of the Dongwang Pavilion, and even make the will of the God of the East descend. Those were nothing in front of Lu Qiu. Then, Li Chuji would be trampled under the feet of the top genius of Rikugenji. It would be better if I were Lu Qiu. Higashiwa smiled and waited to see Qin Hao being defeated by Lu Qiu. Then, 6 sword peaks of the 7-sword mountain collapsed. Qin Hao and Lu Qiu each took out 3 sword spirits and faced each other in the air. They looked at the last sword peak, which was the first peak. In the next moment, the 2 of them attacked at the same time. Their divine wills swept out, and the powerful pressure of Tianlun fell on the first sword peak, trying to force the sword spirit out and take it for themselves. Rumble. Qin Hao and Lu Qiu's divine wills were extremely powerful, and the first peak couldn't withstand it. It shattered, and then a beam of sword spirit flew out and floated in the air between the 2. Qin Hao's eyes were like fire as he stared at the sword spirits. Driven by the divine will, the last sword spirit tilted slightly and was about to fly over. Seeing this, Lu Qiu's eyes shone sharply. A majestic pressure of sword Dao descended from the sky, trapping the sword spirit. The sword spirit sensed Lu Qiu's powerful sword Dao power and suddenly changed direction, wanting to fly towards Lu Qiu. Qin Hao frowned. The sword power contained in Lu Qiu's Tianluan was stronger than he had imagined. He raised his sword finger and pointed at the sword spirit, calling softly, "Come." This voice seemed to be mixed with magic. Spots of divine light appeared on Qin Hao's body, entwined by the particles of law. The will that suppressed the space suddenly became stronger. Buzz! The sword spirit trembled and turned back to Qin Hao, ready to attack. Lu Qiu's eyes fell on Qin Hao and was slightly surprised. He seemed to have underestimated the ability of this younger brother. Even if he released the Tianluan and operated the sword power of the Great Path, he still couldn't win the sword spirit over. Did he really have to take it by force? Since you saw through the sword will spirit, you should have comprehended the 7th move. But I must have this sword spirit of 7 kills, Lu Qiu said. The celestial Tianlun around his body suddenly rotated, and the rumbling sound of the sword came from the void, as if thousands of swords were dancing wildly and worshipping him. His aura was incomparably divine. At this moment, the cultivators of 7-Sword Mountain could no longer see Lu Qiu's figure clearly. An extremely dazzling divine sword appeared where he was. It seemed to be the incarnation of Lu Qiu, releasing boundless power. The brilliant brilliance drowned the entire void, and strands of sword power wrapped around the sword spirit in the center, trying to forcibly pull it back. What a powerful sword power! Wuk felt Lu Qiu's divine power, and his heart was moved. He was a little worried for Qin Hao. Under normal circumstances, it should not be a problem for Qin Hao to defeat Lu Qiu. The key was that he had hidden his cultivation. Once he unleashed the divine power of the original realm and released the perfect Tianlun, it was bound to alarm the entire Kunlun Sea. He would be at the forefront of the storm and become the target of public criticism. The perfect Tianlun was above the divine master, and it was the symbol of the divine king who unified all the realms. How could people like them, who didn't have a strong background, forge a divine king level Tianlun? It was too shocking. If things went wrong, it would be remembered by someone who would summon a divine master to dismember Qin Hao and refine his soul to seize the perfect Tianlun. This was Qin Hao's weakness. Facing a super genius like Lu Qiu, it was obvious that he couldn't win without using all his strength. Fate. Illusion Elder shook his head. The wisp of hope in his heart was shattered. It seemed that he couldn't get the Sword Emperor's ultimate skill. Xiaohan pursed her lips. She had witnessed Qin Hao's rise all the way. No matter who he encountered, he had never lost unless he didn't want to win. Was he going to lose to Lu Qiu today? Although she was a little sad, compared to Qin Hao's safety, giving up one sword's 7 kills was not a bad thing. You can't get this ultimate skill. Suddenly, a cold voice sounded in the air, revealing a strong sense of self-confidence. Everyone looked at Qin Hao. He dared to talk to Lu Qiu like that. How dare he? A mere third-order Nirvana realm. Lu Qiu was also shocked. Was he going to continue fighting? At this time, a divine sword radiance radiated from Qin Hao. The divine power it emitted made countless cultivators unable to take their eyes off it. They all stared at the divine weapon. The modeled characters flowed on the sword, emitting an ancient and mysterious aura. Obviously, this was a rare divine sword, extremely extraordinary. At this time, Qin Hao's sword fingers pressed on the sword hilt, and the art of endless samsara was activated. His divine will resonated with the divine weapon. Suddenly, a sword radiance flew out, not toward Lu Qiu, but toward the sword spirit. The last sword spirit seemed to feel something and actually trembled with excitement. It directly abandoned Lu Qiu's divine power and flew toward Qin Hao along the brilliance of the great void sword. Lu Qiu couldn't help but tremble. His face tightened. The divine power of Tianlun rolled out, ready to restrain the sword spirit and block its path. However, when he saw the determination in Qin Hao's eyes and felt the aura from the great void sword, his heart couldn't help but tremble. Then, the light of Tianlun on Lu Qiu disappeared. Go! Lu Qiu waved her hand, and the 3 sword spirits floating beside her swept out side by side with a whiz sound and flew towards Qin Hao. No wonder a third-order Nirvana cultivator could easily kill a near-god with one sword. No wonder he communicated with the power of the big world in the Dongwang realm and alerted the will of Dongwang to descend. Lu Qiu understood. He looked at the determination on Qin Hao's face and couldn't bear it. He chose to give up the one sword's 7 kills. Many cultivators in Rikujinji froze on the spot. Young Master gave up fighting for the sword spirit. Why? Higashiwa was also dumbfounded. This was also the question he wanted to ask. Why? He could have crushed Li Chuji, but Lu Qiu gave up. In the area of the 7-sword mountain, the sword cultivators from various realms were stunned. They couldn't understand Lu Qiu's actions, including Illusion Elder, Wuk, and Xiaohan. They didn't expect this outcome. Why? Lu Qiu put away the Tianlun, and the sword power disappeared. Qin Hao couldn't help but feel lighter. He asked Lu Qiu as the 7 sword spirits surrounded him. A gentleman should help others achieve their goals. Lu Qiu nodded and smiled. He sighed in his heart. Junior brother, you almost deceived me. Why did you hide your cultivation? Lu Qiu saw through Qin Hao's disguise. Although he didn't know the reason, Qin Hao must have his difficulties. If Qin Hao exposed himself because of fighting for the sword spirit, Lu Qiu would feel uneasy and guilty. He wouldn't be able to face the martial god in the future. Therefore, he gave up. Thank you. Qin Hao didn't expect this person to be so open-minded. He was worthy of being called a sword genius. Cultivation, strength, talent, and character were all excellent. Wuk! Qin Hao shouted at Wuk. With a thought, the sword spirits of the 7 peaks merged into one and condensed into a beam of sword intent that flew towards Wuk. When they saw this, the cultivators in the surroundings could not help but take a step forward. It was as if they could feel the sword intent flying towards them. This sword intent contained the true essence and profundity of the Sword Emperor's one strike, 7 kills. Hum! A terrifying sword sound came from Lu Qiu's body. His sharp eyes scanned all the cultivators. When his aura spread out, the restless cultivators all gulped and stayed where they were. Wuk stepped forward. His body emitted a nirvana light. A beam of light shot out from his forehead and merged with the 7 kills sword intent. Then, the sword spirit of the 7 peaks entered the sword mark between his eyebrows and merged with him. Whoosh! At this moment, the 9 realms light on Wuk's body became even more dazzling. Zhu sword spirit and his sword spirit desperately absorbed the power of the Sword Emperor's sword. His aura immediately changed. A halo of laws condensed on the spot. He leveled up. Everyone's hearts beat fast. After merging with the 7 kills sword intent, he immediately leveled up. It was even more effective than divine pills. Moreover, everyone could feel that this was only a small surprise that the 7 kills sword intent brought to Wuk. The Sword Emperor's sword intent was so vast that it couldn't be refined so quickly. In the future, he might be able to reap great benefits from it. It's done. Wuk smiled at Qin Hao. After leaving the divine wilderness, this was the first time he let out a silly and sincere laugh. How could he not know that Qin Hao was prepared to reveal his cultivation in front of Lucio for his sake? Thank you. May I know your name? I will definitely visit you in the future. Qin Hao cupped his hands towards Lucio. Wuk also bowed slightly. This person's talent and sword skills were extraordinary. It's just a small matter. Don't worry, we will meet again. Lucio smiled meaningfully and waved to his subordinates in the distance. Let's go. Wong. Higashiwa's fists were about to bleed. He turned around and glared at Qin Hao before following Lucio. He's a strange person. Xiaohan came to Qin Hao's side. Lucio's style was unfathomable. He's a wonderful person. Qin Hao raised his hand and pinched Xiaohan's face. He let out a long sigh in the direction of Lucio's departure. He naturally didn't doubt Lucio's sincerity. Otherwise, he wouldn't have caused Higashiwa's resentment and dissatisfaction. Perhaps this was a true sword cultivator. Open and above board. Young master, why did you give away the sword spirit? That's the killing technique of the Sword Emperor. After leaving the 7-Sword Mountain, a Rikujinji expert spoke to Lucio. He felt that it was unfair. If you can't get the 1 sword 7 kills, how can you explain it to my master? Sigh. Another person sighed. Lucio had missed a great opportunity to show off. He was afraid that the other princes would take advantage of this. It's just a sword technique. Without the sword spirit, I can't master the 7 kills. Lucio said majestically. He had comprehended all 7 moves. With his talent, he believed that he could not only rival the 7 kills, but even surpass its creator, the Sword Emperor. This was him, Lucio. Not only him, he believed that Qin Hao also had the same idea. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given the sword spirit to that cold-looking young man. He and Qin Hao wouldn't rely on the sword spirit to practice the 7 kills. Although that's true, but everyone was helpless. They knew what the young master was capable of and believed that he could achieve great things. However, how could the 7 kills be so easy to master? One could imagine how difficult it would be. Lucio would probably suffer a lot. Brother Lu, don't you think you owe me an explanation? Higashiwa said in a hoarse voice. He didn't care if the sword spirit was given to others, but why did he give it to Li Chuji? Li Chuji was his enemy. He couldn't wait to kill him. Explanation? Lucio glanced at Higashiwa impatiently. Are you telling me how to do things? This. Higashiwa met Lucio's gaze. It was as if his heart was pierced by an ice sword. He lowered his head and said, I don't dare. Remember what I said. Don't provoke Li Chuji again. If something happens, don't blame me for not giving face to my aunt. Lucio warned sternly and ignored Higashiwa. Higashiwa was slightly frightened and didn't dare to speak again. Although the blood of the Lu family flowed in his body, he knew that his mother was only from a side branch of the Lu family. She was Lucio's nanny when he was young. Because of this, their relationship was closer. In fact, Lucio's bloodline was not related to him. Lucio wouldn't treat him as a brother just because of a distant aunt. Li Chuji, just you wait. I won't let you have an easy time. Higashiwa secretly clenched his fists. At this moment, a person appeared in his mind. Lin Xian of the Lin family, in Kunlun. Chapter 1993. Relying on Lu Qiu wouldn't be able to avenge him. Lu Qiu had a high status and was arrogant, so he wouldn't take Higashiwa seriously. He was just a servant to Lu Qiu. If he wanted to avenge himself, Higashiwa had to rely on himself. Lin Xian and Li Chuji had a grudge against each other, so he might as well use Lin Xian to get rid of him. Wonderful, Fairy Su praised. Fairy Su praised. She had witnessed the entire process of Seven Sword Mountain. Now, the 7 peaks had all collapsed, the sword spirits had been taken away, the miracles had disappeared, and the cultivators had all left. It was indeed wonderful. Xianzi nodded. After 10,000 years, the Sword Emperor's secret technique finally had a successor. The performance of Li Chuji and Wuk, as well as Lu Qiu's magnanimity, were quite admirable. In fact, it was very rare for Li Chuji and his companion to be able to break out of the encirclement of so many overlords and kill 7 people with one sword. After all, the overlords who occupied the 7 peaks were basically Heavenly Wheel realm cultivators. What Qin Xiao didn't expect was that Lu Qiu would give up at the critical moment. I found out that the overlord who defeated the overlords of the 7 peaks is from Rikujinji. He's most likely the son of Divine Lord Lu Qiu. A disciple of the Kunlun Sea appeared behind Fairy Su. Lu Qiu, that's weird. Su Qian nodded silently. She had heard rumors about this person. He was a genius who dominated the Sword Realm and was known as the Flag of the 3 Sword Realms. Not only is the son of Divine Lord Lu here, but the young man in yellow who occupied the 7 peaks is also the son of a Divine Lord from the True Dragon Sword Realm. The disciple of the Kunlun Sea said, "Junior sister, what do you think?" Su Qian's heart was slightly stirred. This grand event had attracted the son of 2 Divine Lords. She didn't know if it was an honor or a tragedy for the Kunlun Sea. If the Exalted Lord were still alive, it would be normal for the son of a Grand Realm to visit the Kunlun Sea. Unfortunately, the Exalted Lord has passed away. Qin Xiaohe said bitterly. Zihua Supreme Holiness was a master at the level of a quasi-godly master. He was of the same generation as Godly Master Lu of the Sword Realm and Godly Master True Dragon. It wasn't inappropriate for their sons to visit. However, Kunlun Sea wasn't qualified to receive such an honor. I'm going to see Master. No matter what, a visit from the son of a divine master of 2 worlds should be taken seriously. Su Qian said solemnly. Then she smiled and said, "What about you? Do you still want to follow me?" She was naturally referring to Qin Hao. There's no harm in following and taking a look, Qin Xiao has said with a smile. Su Qian nodded. Divine light overflowed from her body, and she disappeared with the Kunlun Sea disciples behind her. Qin Xiaohe gazed in the direction Qin Hao had left. She tapped the void with the tip of her foot and flew in that direction. Somewhere in the void, Qin Hao and the others were flying through the air, following the direction of the dense spiritual qi. 2 people were following behind them. Chu Ning, the 3rd daughter of the Chu clan in Kunlun, and Old Man Chu. How long are you going to continue following us? Qin Hao stopped and looked back. They had left the 7 Sword Mountain for quite some time, and they had visited a few ruins along the way. However, the 3rd daughter of the Chu clan seemed to be sticking to them, unwilling to leave. Cough, cough. Sir, please don't take offense. Our young miss saw that you were all extraordinary, so she wanted to get to know you. Old Man Chu said awkwardly. Chu Ning also revealed a smile. That smile is treacherous. You have ill intentions. Cragtang looked at the 3rd daughter of the Chu clan and gave a serious evaluation. Nonsense. I'm sincere in wanting to befriend you. What ill intentions do I have? Chu Ning stepped forward and put her hands on her waist angrily. She was the 3rd daughter of the Chu clan, the apple of Kunlun's God Chu's eye. She was born with everything she wanted. Why would she have ill intentions toward others? Why don't I see any sincerity from the 3rd daughter of the Chu clan? Wuk asked. Qin Hao crossed his arms and looked at Chu Ning with a smile. The 3rd daughter of the Chu clan is sticking to us like glue. You do have some sincerity. Speak, what do you want? If you don't tell us, don't blame us for chasing you away. Don't. I'm just curious. How did you know that the Sword Mountain was hiding a spirit? Also, can you teach me the one sword, 7 kills technique? Chuning looked at Qin Hao with bright eyes and smiled. That was her goal. I knew she didn't have good intentions. Crag Tang mumbled. Shut up. Qin Hao scolded. He stepped forward and circled Chuning twice. He looked at her and nodded. It was as if he was looking at a product on the counter. If Chuning didn't have a request, Old Man Chu would have attacked her. Your figure's not bad. You comprehended the one sword technique in half a day. You have some talent. Unfortunately, this one disciple is enough for me. I don't want a second one. Qin Hao sighed and pointed at Wuk. He meant that this was his disciple. Wuk rolled his eyes at Qin Hao. Why was he pretending? However, he didn't expose him. He's your disciple? Chuning was very surprised. She looked at Qin Hao and Shou Wuk. These two were like brothers. How did they become master and disciple? He's an expert, Old Man Chu murmured. From this, it seemed that the cold-faced young man was able to comprehend the 5 moves of the 7 peaks because the silver-haired young man had secretly taught him. This was a true expert. The two of you saw it with your own eyes. How could it be fake? Qin Hao put his hands behind his back and said righteously, I know what Miss Chu is thinking. However, I swore that I wouldn't accept any more disciples. You shouldn't follow me. This... Chuning was dumbfounded. She looked at Old Man Chu. She still couldn't believe it. Miss, above the Nirvana realm, don't judge by appearance. Some people have outstanding martial art comprehension, but their talent is slightly weaker. I guess that his actual lifespan might be longer than mine. Because he used the law to preserve his appearance, he looks younger. Old Man Chu explained. On the other side, Qin Hao and the others had already walked far away. Senior, wait a moment. Chuning sincerely wants to be your disciple. I hope you can teach me the one sword 7 kills. Chuning immediately chased after him. Miss Chu, don't say too much. Old Man swore that he wouldn't accept any more disciples. You also saw it on the 7 Peaks Mountain. Although I comprehended the 7 moves, the sword spirit gave it to my disciple in the end. In order to cultivate a disciple, I spent a lot of effort. Qin Hao shook his head and refused. Xiao Han couldn't help but want to beat him up. Senior, don't worry. Chuning, definitely won't let you waste your effort. My Chu family dominates the Kunlun continent and has a rich foundation. There are many spirit pills and divine medicines. I hope Senior can teach me the one sword 7 kills. Chuning definitely won't let down Master's nurturing and will definitely repay you. Chuning said sincerely, incomparably nervous. Old Man isn't the only one who comprehended the Sword Emperor Divine technique. Why don't you go find that person? Qin Hao said, hinting at Lucio. That guy isn't to be trifled with. He's not as easy to communicate with as Senior. Chuning wasn't a fool. Lucio was full of arrogance and had a big temper. He forced back the Immortal Grove World's female heavenly wheel expert with a shout. If she made him unhappy one day, what if something happened? In contrast, Qin Hao seemed much more amiable. Moreover, after comprehending the 7 kills, he immediately thought of his disciple and even gave the sword spirit formed by the Sword Emperor Dao intent to her. He simply gave everything and didn't hold back. Where could she find such a good master? It's a pity that my cultivation is too weak, 3rd level Nirvana realm. Qin Hao let out a long sigh. Cultivation doesn't represent everything. Didn't you teach a 5th level Nirvana realm disciple? Chuning said, glancing at Wuk. The other party could ignore cultivation. Could it be that she, Chuning, wasn't as courageous and insightful as others? Old Mister, the young people aren't directors. Aren't you going to stop them? Qin Hao said to Uncle Chu. I don't dare. Senior can just call me Chu Mao. Uncle Chu was flattered and bowed. My family's young miss doesn't care about Senior's background and cultivation. She sincerely seeks guidance. I hope Senior will accept this disciple. This, Qin Hao revealed a difficult expression. Quit while you're ahead. She's the daughter of one of Kunlun's 3 great families. Are you done yet? Xiaohan pinched Qin Hao's waist. All right then. Since young Miss Chu has followed me so far, I'll accept you as a registered disciple. Let me say this first. I won't stay here for long. When I leave, we'll no longer be master and disciple. During this period, I'll try my best to guide you. Qin Hao faced Kong Dao and felt a faint pain in his waist. He had a divine body. How could Han Er's hand be so strong? Chu Ning of Kunlun's Chu clan greets master. Third Miss Chu hurriedly bowed and knelt in the air. She kowtowed 3 times to Qin Hao. Chu Mao of Kunlun. Thank you, senior. Uncle Chu said with a smile. He was satisfied. With such an extraordinary person teaching his young miss, the Sword Emperor Divine technique would definitely be passed down in the Chu clan. He wasn't worried that Qin Hao would leave. On the contrary, it was good that he left. With Chu Ning's talent, she would definitely forge a heavenly wheel in the future and become a famous goddess in Kunlun and the surrounding 100 worlds. If Qin Hao didn't leave, it would definitely bring a stain to Chu Ning and the Chu clan. They would become a laughingstock. Chu Ning greets senior brother, master's wife, and Chu Ning stiffened in front of Illusion Elder and Crazed Tang, not knowing how to address them. This is Illusion Elder. He's called Tang. Qin Hao introduced. Senior Illusion Elder, Big Brother Tang. Chu Ning said. Illusion Elder nodded slightly. Crazed Tang had an indifferent expression. Muddle-headed. We're 1 generation apart. Wuk felt helpless. Chu Ning, you and old Mr. Chu will follow Master for now. Kunlun Sea God Path had a lot of opportunities. Master will help you get some later to help you refine your laws. Ha ha ha, Qin Hao said with a laugh. All right. Chu Ning was very happy. Suddenly, the 2 sides merged. The Heavenly Wheel experts of Kunlun's Chu clan became Qin Hao's followers and headed towards Kunlun Sea again. Along the way, the Illusion Revered Elder and Chu Mao talked a lot. Because Chu Ning called him senior brother, Wu Kei also taught Chu Ning a bit of the way of the sword. On the other hand, Qin Hao and Xiaohan were holding each other's arms, as if they were an immortal couple touring the Kunlun Mountains. From the moment he agreed to take Chu Ning as his disciple, he no longer paid any attention to him. Senior brother's understanding of sword principles has amazed Chu Ning. Chu Ning thanked from the bottom of her heart. Although her cultivation was higher than Wuk's, her understanding of sword principles was much worse. Many things that she was confused about before were cleared up by Wuk. It's a small matter. You can just call me Wuk. Wuk said casually. Chu Ning came from a Shinto family in Kunlun, so she naturally didn't lack powerful techniques. What she lacked was flexibility in actual combat and flexible use of sword arts. Senior brother is senior brother. It's too disrespectful to call you by your name. Chu Ning smiled. Her senior brother was a good person and wasn't as cold as he looked. As you wish. Wuk walked a few steps forward and left Chu Ning behind. After all, they weren't really from the same sect. What's that? All of a sudden, Qin Hao heard the sound of a Suona and a Sheng. He looked over and saw a group of people dressed in white mourning clothes moving in a grand manner in the distant void. Immediately, underworld coins floated in the air, and a pair of paper children with pale faces held up their soul vases to lead the way as they traveled over. Master, don't be surprised. This is Zihua Exalted's underworld guard. Chu Ning was from Kunlun after all, so she knew Kunlun's sea very well. Underworld guard? Qin Hao thought in a low voice. He saw a huge pill cauldron in the huge group of people. Chapter 1994. Our Kunlun continent is famous for its alchemy. The 3 divine path families are proficient in alchemy, not to mention the one who built the Kunlun Sea, Exalted Zihua. His Tao of Exalted had reached the divine realm. He could use all things in the universe as materials to reverse the heavenly wheel's grade. Chu Mao pointed at the huge cauldron in the team. This was left behind by the Exalted for alchemy. It is said that its power is unparalleled. No one has been able to control it until now. Qin Hao nodded. Before coming here, he heard from the Illusion Venerable that the Kunlun continent of Sky Ho Divine World were all alchemists. The Kunlun Lin clan and Chu Ning's family were all well-versed in alchemy. Exalted Zihua was once the ruler of the heavenly Tao. His ability in alchemy was known. Although it was impossible to complete the heavenly wheel of divine path, it was definitely not difficult to repair it. From the looks of it, the Kunlun Sea pulling out the exalted cauldron was a kind of ceremony for the experts of all realms to pay respect and reminisce. As the Swanam music entered his ears, the sound of the wind gradually approached. Soon, the huge group of Netherworld wardens swam in front of Qin Hao. Chu Ning and Chu Mao stood still solemnly to express their respect for exalted Zihua. Illusion Elder and the others did the same. Qin Hao looked at the underworld guards from a close distance and was surprised. This team looked majestic from afar, but when they came in front of him, they were all made of paper. There was not a single living person. Puppet art. Qin Hao thought to himself. Kunlun Sea indeed had a lot of talented people. They even had a puppet master. These underworld children were very lifelike. Although their bodies were made of paper, other than their frighteningly pale faces, their movements were agile. They did not look like puppets at all. They were no different from living people. The expert who built the underworld guards for the exalted is very powerful. What praise from the bottom of his heart. Puppeteers were even rarer than alchemists and refiners. An outstanding puppeteer, other than being good at mechanisms, would also need to dabble in formations, disguises, and inscriptions. Furthermore, they were proficient in all of them. Obviously, this puppet master of Kunlun Sea had reached the level of heavenly wheel. If he made the facial features of these underworld children less scary and slightly modified them, he could even create existences that were comparable to living people. It's just a small trick, not worth mentioning. Hearing Wuck's praise, an old voice came from somewhere in the group. Chu Mao of the Chu clan greets Master Lu. Chu Mao took a few steps forward and cupped his hands in salute. Master Lu is an old friend of the exalted Venerable One. He is of high seniority and is highly respected. His puppetry skills are unfathomable, and the three aristocratic families all admire him greatly. We hope that Master Lu can assist us. Unfortunately, Grandmaster lives deep in the Kunlun Sea and is unwilling to join any family. Chu Ning whispered to Qin Hao, "Since you are an old friend of the Supreme Venerable, it is only right for me to pay my respects." Qin Hao stepped forward and bowed slightly to everyone. "No need to be so courteous. According to the rules of the event, all of you have to inject a strand of origin energy into the Supreme Divine Cauldron to receive the Supreme Divine Cauldron's gift. Hurry up! All the cultivators who pass by have already received their gifts." Grandmaster Lu's voice echoed out. This time, Qin Hao noticed that these words came from the mouths of the four deep children carrying the cauldrons. Grandmaster Lu himself wasn't present. Command from a distance, control through divine sense. Every time the event is held, the Supreme Venerable Underworld Guard will randomly appear in all directions of the Kunlun Sea. Not everyone has the fortune of encountering them. This is fate. Grandmaster Li, if you inject your strength into the Divine Cauldron, the Divine Cauldron will give you different gifts according to your cultivation and talent. This will depend on your individual ability. Chu Mao said. The Supreme Venerable had passed away, but the Divine Cauldron could still refine pills and give gifts so that the people of the world would remember the Supreme Venerable. So that's how it is. Qin Hao said. How come everyone is a Grandmaster now? Grandmaster Lu's voice echoed from the deep children's guard. There was a hint of dissatisfaction in his voice, as if he had lost his status. Grandmaster Lu might not know, but this Grandmaster Li comprehended the 7 styles of Sword Peak and broke through the Sword Sovereign's ultimate technique. Now, he has become a good teacher to guide my family's young miss. Chu Mao explained. A 3rd order Nirvana teaching a 6th order Nirvana. Your Chu family's taste is becoming lower and lower. Old man has a whole new level of respect for you. However, for him to be able to break through the Sword Sovereign's 7 killing sword is also quite extraordinary. All right, don't waste old man's time. Grandmaster Lu urged. He still had to lead the underworld guards to other places to give gifts to others. Wuck, Qin Hao said. Wuk took a few steps forward and pointed his finger. A wisp of Sword Dao power was injected into the giant cauldron. Instantly, the giant divine cauldron flickered with a dazzling brilliance. A mysterious power circulated from the inside of the cauldron, as if someone was refining pills. In an instant, a pill flew out and landed in Wuk's hand. Emperor Pill, peerless grade. Qin Hao smiled and said to Wuk, "What are you waiting for? Quickly thank Grandmaster Lu." This Emperor Pill emitted an extremely strong Nirvana Dao will. It was obvious that the ingredients used were expensive. After fusing with Wuk's sword intent, the pill's attribute changed and could help to increase the power of Sword Dao. Many thanks, Grandmaster Lu. Wuk thanked sincerely. He didn't consume it on the spot, but kept the Emperor Pill first. At this moment, Chu Mao glanced at Wuk. It was a peerless grade Emperor Pill. It could be seen that this person's talent was extraordinary. Xiao Han took a few steps forward and injected a wisp of origin energy into the divine cauldron. Instantly, a dazzling light shone as another pill flew out and landed in their direction. Qin Hao looked at the pill in Xiao Han's hand and nodded with satisfaction. Emperor Pill, peerless grade. This. Chu Mao's eyes were filled with surprise. It was another peerless grade pill. Although its aura wasn't as strong as the previous one, its quality was actually the same. "It's my turn," Feng Tang mumbled. With a wave of his hand, a powerful flame swept out. In the void, the image of a phoenix soared up and entered the divine cauldron. The divine cauldron trembled a few times due to Feng Tang's phoenix flames. After stabilizing, a red pill flew out along with the fragrance of the pill. The bright red luster contained a terrifying burning aura. Emperor Pill, peerless grade. Chu Mao's heart pounded. He looked at Qin Hao's group with a strange expression. Just what kind of people were they? Each one of them had formed a peerless grade pill. In fact, it was extremely difficult to form a peerless grade pill with the help of a supreme divine cauldron. Throughout the years, only the monstrous geniuses of peak great worlds had the qualifications to do so. For example, Lu Qiu. In just a few breaths of time, 3 peerless grade pills had been formed in front of him. Today, Chu Mao had broadened his horizons. Where did you all come from? Could it be that each of your Dao insights has been tempered to perfection? The 4 deep children carrying the cauldron spoke at the same time. This was the first time he had seen peerless grade pills gathered together and from a group of people. We juniors came from the sword world. Qin Hao chuckled as he looked at the illusion sovereign. The illusion sovereign's heavenly wheel loomed above him. Traces of spatial power flowed along the heavenly wheel, turning into a beam of light that entered the divine cauldron. The divine cauldron immediately shook. After all, a heavenly wheel expert was different from an Emperor Realm expert. When his divine power entered the cauldron, it caused a strong reaction. But soon, Exalted Zihua's cauldron calmed down, completely withstanding the illusion sovereign's divine power, and began to form the pill. As a rich pill fragrance wafted out, a pill emitting divine light appeared. However, this divine pill was flawed. It wasn't as pure and perfect as Wuk's. And this is normal. Master Lu's voice sounded. He was afraid that another peerless grade pill would appear. If the illusion sovereign also produced a peerless grade divine pill, it would definitely cause a sensation in this year's gathering. On the surface, Master Lu was representing Exalted Zihua to give gifts to the experts of various worlds. But in fact, it was a method to spy on the experts of various worlds. The illusion sovereign wasn't unhappy. On the contrary, he happily accepted the low-grade pill. He was very grateful to Exalted Zihua's divine cauldron. After all, it was a divine grade pill. How many people had begged Exalted Zihua to refine a pill for them? Moreover, this low-grade flawed pill could strengthen the illusion sovereign's divine power to a certain extent. Next, Chu Ning and Chu Mao also released their Dao power and obtained pills. They were respectively high-grade Emperor Realm and mid-grade Divine Realm. The Chu family didn't lack pills. Their family was also famous for alchemy. However, The pills refined from Exalted Zihua's divine cauldron had a high collection value. You're the only one left. Hurry up, Master Lu urged. The four deep children carrying the cauldron looked at Qin Hao at the same time. Faintly, Qin Hao could see a trace of anger in their eyes. Did I provoke him? Qin Hao was speechless. Wasn't it just the title of master? Why did they make it sound like he was insulting old man Lu? Next, Qin Hao took a few steps forward. Just as he was about to make a move, he stopped. If he poured his source strength into the divine cauldron, would the cauldron explode? It had to be known that Qin Hao was the ruler of the Origin Realm's heavenly Tao. His heavenly wheel was at the perfect level for an existence like him. Even if Exalted Zihua were to refine pills for Qin Hao, he still wouldn't be able to refine pills on the same level. Thinking of this, Qin Hao was in a difficult position. Hurry up. Why are you wearing the title of master? Do you still want to put on airs in front of old man? Master Lu's voice became more and more dissatisfied, as if Qin Hao had sullied his eyes. He wished he could separate from this person as soon as possible. That's right, honorable master. Hurry up and make a move. I'm also very curious as to what kind of pill the Exalted Zihua's divine cauldron will refine for you. Chu Ning said. Qin Hao had seen through the seven-sword mountain sword spirit and condensed the 7 moves into one. Even if his talent was lacking, his perception was extraordinary. It was unknown just what kind of reward the Exalted Zihua's divine cauldron would give him. Master Lu's time is very tight. He still needs to guide the underworld guards to other places. Chu Mao also urged. Li Chuji was taking too long to make a move, which was very impolite. Okay. Qin Hao restrained his aura and changed his divine power. The demonic emblem on his shoulder reacted. Traces of evil power overflowed from the emblem and gathered between his fingers along his arm. He raised his hand and pointed, and a grayish-white beam of light poured into the divine cauldron. He controlled 2 types of laws. Even if they were both nurtured by the perfect heavenly Tao, there was still a huge difference between the indestructible law and the most evil power. He didn't know if releasing the indestructible law would cause trouble for the Exalted Zihua's relic. Qin Hao was even more afraid of causing a commotion. Therefore, he used the most evil power to refine the pill. What is this thing? Stop it, quickly stop it. Almost as soon as Qin Hao moved, Master Lu's voice immediately came from the 4 underworld children's mouths. The grayish-white beam of light was mixed with extreme resentment, as if it had gathered all the evils in the world. Even if Master Lu wasn't here, he could still sense the horror of this power through the connection between him and the puppets. This was a power he had rarely seen. Vaguely, it seemed to be related to the 9th Nether Ghost Realm and the Killing Realm. In an instant, Master Lu was shocked. Unfortunately, it was too late. The most evil power had been injected into the cauldron by Qin Hao. Accompanied by Master Lu's panicked scream, the space became still at this moment. Huh? Why is there no commotion? Qin Hao looked at Exalted Zihua's divine cauldron. There was no light flowing, no pill fragrance overflowing, and not even a trace of movement. It shouldn't be. Wuk, Chu Ning, Chu Mao, and the others' expressions froze. They stared blankly at the divine cauldron, feeling puzzled. Your Tao will power. Master Lu was about to speak. Boom! The lid of the divine cauldron soared into the sky, turned into a black light, and flew into the sky. No one knew where it went. Then, the underworld children's paper dolls and the huge underworld guards exploded one after another. Their fragments flew wildly, and the solemn sound of the Suono was interrupted. The huge divine cauldron tilted with a hum. Instantly, thousands of spiritual materials and elixirs spilled out from the inside and scattered all over the sky. The scene was extremely chaotic. Chapter 1995. The exalted, godly cauldron contained a universe, and it stored a large number of spiritual treasures of heaven and earth. These herbs grew on various celestial mountains in the Kunlun Sea. Every year during the grand meeting, Master Lu would order people to gather herbs of different types and grades from various celestial mountains to be used to forge the elixirs. The cauldron was a divine object that nurtured an artifact spirit. It had accompanied the exalted divine cauldron for many years and had practically engraved all of the exalted divine cauldron's alchemy experiences. Even if no one was controlling it, it could still forge pills on its own. The exalted divine cauldron had refined countless pills throughout his life. The cauldron spirit would forge pills suitable for different cultivators according to their needs and attributes. However, this was the first time it had encountered an extremely evil force. Even the exalted divine cauldron had never refined an evil pill. The tiny artifact spirit was not the exalted divine cauldron. It was completely caught off guard by something new. There was also no method to concoct an evil pill in its memory. Therefore, this awkward scene occurred. Thousands of divine materials spilled out. It gave the impression that the cauldron had swallowed something filthy in the world and vomited it out on the spot. This! Chu Mao opened his eyes wide and was speechless. Wuk, Xiao Han, and the illusion sovereign were all sweating. Qin Hao had failed to refine a pill, but he had forced the exalted divine cauldron into a mess. Qin Hao felt that it was a pity when he saw the divine materials falling from the sky into the sea. This cauldron is no good. Crazed Tang pointed at the giant cauldron and said, "Impudent! This cauldron is the exalted divine cauldron. It has refined countless divine pills and fulfilled the dreams of countless experts from various major domains. How dare you question and slander it?" Master Lu shouted angrily. "Tang Xintian's consciousness is damaged, and he's an idiot. Master Lu, you can't be more calculative than him." Qin Hao hastily apologized. He looked around and saw that only 7 or 8 underworld children were left of the underworld guard. All of them were crippled. Even the 4 underworld children who carried the cauldron for the exalted divine cauldron were missing an arm or a leg. One of them was only left with a head. Master Lu's voice came from the head. It seemed that the extremely evil force had caused great damage to the underworld guard. A sin, a sin. Fortunately, Master Lu himself was fine. "Speak. Where did you come from? Ghost domain or slaughter domain? Why is the Tao energy of resentment and killing so strong?" Master Lu questioned in a loud voice. He was simply born to destroy. Chu Ning and Chu Mao also stared at Qin Hao with bewilderment in their eyes. Could it be that they weren't from the sword world? The Kunlun Sea did not reject the cultivators from the ghost realm and the killing realm. Every realm in the untainted land had its own way of heaven. Although the ways were different, they were all cultivation. Therefore, there was no good or bad power. It depended on who controlled it. The ghost realm, and killer realm were both extremely famous divine masters. They were under the control of the Archean realm and served a certain divine king. They did not cause trouble in other realms. Master Lu was just angry that Li Chuji had concealed his identity and caused damage to the Supreme Holiness Relic. To Master Lu, this godly cauldron wasn't just an object. It also carried the 10,000-year friendship between him and Supreme Holiness Zihua. This junior is indeed from the Sword Realm. As I have been apprenticed to a master from the Ghost Realm in my early years, I possess the power of ghost resentment. It was the Grand Master who ordered me to channel energy into the divine cauldron. If the cauldron spirit is damaged, this junior is willing to compensate. Qin Hao said sincerely. He never thought that the divine cauldron would not be able to withstand the extreme evil energy. Compensate. The one-headed boy glared fiercely at Qin Hao and asked, "Can you afford to compensate?" This cauldron was Zihua's blood, sweat, and tears. It had accompanied him all the way from when he was weak until he finally attained the heavenly wheel of divine path. Third uncle. Chu Ning tugged at Chu Mao's sleeve. Chu Mao revealed a troubled expression. Even the Chu clan couldn't afford to compensate for the Supreme Holiness Relic. However, since Li Chuji had agreed to teach Chu Ning the Sword Emperor's divine techniques, he was now a guest elder of the Chu clan. Naturally, they had to interfere. Chu Mao stepped forward and said, "Master Lu, the The Chu clan is willing to compensate for the damage done to the cauldron spirit. The Chu clan? Haha, Chu Mao. After Zihua's fall, the Kunlun Ocean is indeed not what it used to be, allowing the three aristocratic families to emerge. However, the Chu clan can't afford to compensate for this cauldron either. Tell Supreme Holiness Chu to personally pay a visit to Old Man after the grand banquet. If he refuses, I will not let this matter rest. Master Lu's thunderous roar caused the void to rumble. Even the old ancestor of the Chu clan wouldn't be able to repair the cauldron spirit. After all, he wasn't a heavenly ruler. Senior, this one also knows a little about the art of medicine. I believe that I have the means to nourish the cauldron spirit. Why don't you give me the supreme divine cauldron? Give this junior some time, and I will definitely be able to restore it. Qin Hao felt that it was better not to trouble the Chu clan. He could do it himself. Ha ha ha! Ignorant brat. Master Lu's laughter resounded through the void. He didn't conceal his disdain at all. Then, the remaining underworld guards gathered around the tilted cauldron and left, gradually disappearing into the clouds high in the sky. He looks down on you. Wok said to Qin Hao. Qin Hao smiled helplessly. What kind of person was exalted Zihua? He was the second most powerful person in the divine world, a quasi-divine master expert. His alchemy was so profound that he was revered by countless people in various continents. How could his divine cauldron be restored by others? It could even be said that Master Lu didn't think that Qin Hao had the ability to control it. It wasn't just Qin Hao. Ever since the Supreme Exalted's death, no one else in the world could control the cauldron. If one wanted to concoct medicine, they could only rely on the cauldron spirit to activate it. Therefore, it seemed even more precious. That was why Master Lu lost his temper. Qin Hao didn't blame Master Lu. In fact, he would have done the same. If one day, the great void cauldron was damaged by some lesser nirvana of the divine wilderness continent, Qin Hao didn't believe that the other party would be able to restore his divine weapon. From Master Lu's point of view, it wasn't wrong for him to lose his temper. Master Lu is the most vengeful person in his life. This matter can't be settled peacefully. Chu Mao shook his head and sighed. Li Chuji had just gotten involved with the Chu clan, yet it already brought them such a big trouble. He was really a troublemaker. Qin Hao saw the displeasure on Chu Mao's face, but he didn't say anything. After all, this was his fault. Let's go. The group of people left this place and continued to move forward. Originally, meeting the Supreme Exalted's Underworld Guard was a good thing. It was a rare opportunity. In the end, they parted on bad terms and even offended Master Lu. At this point, they could only rely on the Chu clan to help them settle this matter. No matter what price they had to pay, they had to satisfy Master Lu. At least, that was what Chu Mao thought. After all, Li Chuji didn't have the ability to calm Master Lu's anger. After passing through this area, we will be very close to the Supreme Exalted's tomb. At that time, the cultivators from various realms who entered the Kunlun Sea will gather again to pay their respects to the Supreme Exalted. Chu Ning squeezed out a smile to ease the tension in the group. That old man Lu didn't even try to find so many divine spiritual herbs that fell into the sea. What a waste. What a pity. Crag Tang muttered. It seemed that even he felt sorry for the loss. The Kunlun Sea was created by the Supreme Exalted. It carries the will of the heavenly path of Kunlun. Its will is boundless. It's not that Master Lu doesn't want to find it, but that he can't. Wok said, "You're wise." That's true. Chu Mao nodded. The things that fell into the Kunlun Sea couldn't be retrieved by the current sect Master Hai and the ancestral patriarchs of the three major families, unless someone could control the will of the heavenly path. Master, what are you thinking about? Chu Ning saw that Qin Hao didn't say anything along the way. It seemed that what happened just now was a blow to him. I'm thinking that if I help Master Lu find the herbs, will his anger be appeased? Qin Hao chuckled and looked at Chu Ning. Those herbs were indeed precious. The event happened every 1,000 years, which meant that those herbs would also be picked from the Spirit Mountain once every 1,000 years. Master Li, I admit that you're very smart, but don't joke about this in the future. If others hear it, they will say that the Chu clan is ignorant. Chu Mao said coldly. He changed from junior to old. Yes, master. No one can retrieve the things that fell into the Kunlun Sea. Stop dreaming. Oh, right. Before reaching the tomb of the exalted sage, we still need to cross the sea. Chu Ning reminded. Cross the sea? Wu Kei was a little puzzled. Weren't they currently flying across the sea? The following ceremony isn't an ordinary one. It's extremely difficult. Those who are weak won't be able to cross it and reach the tomb of the exalted sage. Chu Mao's gaze swept across the crowd. Here, only Illusion Elder and I are qualified to cross the sea. If it goes smoothly, we can each bring one more person. As for the rest, we can't take care of them. So, difficult? Illusion Elder was on guard. Even you, and I can't guarantee 100% success rate. It depends on our luck. Chu Mao said. In the process of crossing the sea, they would definitely be attacked by cultivators from other continents in order to compete for the crossing tools. There would be many Heavenly Wheel experts among them. Therefore, Chu Mao and Illusion Elder had to bear the pressure. As a native of Kunlun, Chu Mao naturally had an advantage over other Heavenly Wheel experts. Therefore, bringing Chu Ning along would have a high chance of success. Illusion Elder's cultivation wasn't bad. Even if they didn't meet a difficult opponent, they could still bring one more person. What about the others? Cragtang looked at Chu Mao. Could it be that they were going to leave them to their own devices? Crossing the sea is very dangerous. Rather than losing your life, let me give you a piece of advice. If you can't, then stop here. Wait for me and the third mist to come back and meet up with everyone. What do you think, Master Li? Chu Mao looked at Qin Hao with a meaningful gaze. Li Chuji's comprehension of the 7 styles of the Sword Emperor was extraordinary. However, if Lu Qiu didn't withdraw, then the Sword Emperor Divine Technique would definitely fall into Li Chuji's hands. The difference in strength was too big. Therefore, Chu Mao felt that Qin Hao wasn't suitable for crossing the sea. Third uncle, you're a little overboard. Chu Ning felt that Chu Mao was targeting Qin Hao because of the exalted divine cauldron. He felt that Li Chuji had implicated them. It's okay. Senior Chu can bring Xiao Ning alone. As for the rest of us, you don't need to worry about them. Qin Hao smiled. They had 2 sky wheels in their group. How could they not protect Xiao Han and the others? Arrogant. Since Grandmaster is so stubborn, then bear the consequences. I won't easily intervene. Chu Mao said with a serious face. The Chu clan had participated in the gathering for many generations. They knew the difficulties inside like the back of their hand. The reason they sent Chu Ning to participate was naturally for the exalted divine path's inheritance. Although Chu Ning's chances weren't high, there were some things that had to be tried. Chu Mao couldn't waste too much energy on Qin Hao's group. His mission was to protect the third miss of the Chu clan and let Chu Ning reach the exalted divine tomb. Similarly, if you encounter trouble, we won't easily intervene. After all, we have too many people. The Illusion Elder was disgusted by Chu Mao's attitude. When he needed help, he was respectful. When he was slightly dissatisfied, he would treat him coldly. The Chu clan was nothing special. On the other hand, the Illusion Elder could see that Chu Ning was sincerely seeking guidance from Qin Hao. She also respected this master that she had just recognized. Chapter 1996. The group continued forward. They found out from Chu Ning that the crossing area was actually a no-fly zone. Cultivators who came to participate in the gathering were not allowed to fly. If they wanted to cross the no-fly zone, they had to take the wooden boats prepared by the Kunlun Sea. However, these wooden boats were limited. Qin Hao felt that the further they went, the denser the Ling Qi was. The pressure in the air was getting stronger, and he could even faintly feel the presence of heaven's might. At this speed, it wouldn't be long before the pressure in the air reached a terrifying level. With the suppression of heaven's might, even Heavenly Wheel Realm cultivators would find it difficult to fly. It wasn't that it was impossible, but if they forcefully flew, they would use up too much Shin Qi, which might exceed the burden on their soul. Moreover, this was the rule of the Kunlun Sea. All the participants of the gathering had to follow their rules. Soon, Qin Hao's group arrived at the crossing area. As far as the eye could see, there were countless pieces of wood floating on the surface of the sea in front of them. These pieces of wood were wrapped in green skin and glowed with a hazy halo. Obviously, they were the wooden boats prepared in advance by the Kunlun Sea. The cultivators could only pass through safely by riding the boats. Go down. Qin Hao felt a majestic heavenly might bearing down on him, boundless and boundless. In an instant, he felt as though he was carrying 10,000 mountains on his back. The weight was unbearable. The group of people then landed on the surface of the sea, stepping on the floating wooden boat. When we first arrive, the boats will be very fast. The further we go, the fewer there will be. When the time comes, many experts will fight for it. Master and mistress, please be careful. Chu Ning shouted to Qin Hao. Masterly, I'll take the third miss first. Good luck. Chu Mao and Chu Ning landed on a wooden boat and drove it away without looking back. Qin Hao looked at Chu Mao's back that was getting farther and farther away. He really left them behind. What should we do? Wuck asked as he landed with Illusion Zune. Don't split up. Follow them. Qin Hao said. His divine sense enveloped the wooden boat, carrying Xiao Han and Kuang Tang to chase after Chu Mao. Seeing this, Illusion Zune and Wuck followed closely. Qin Hao wasn't worried about Chu Mao, but Chu Ning. After all, she was his disciple in name. If something happened to her, how could he not care? According to Xiao Ning, the further we go, the fewer boats there will be. In order to get the means of crossing, there will be a fight. Xiao Han said. Qin Hao nodded. Many cultivators had come for the inheritance of the divine path of the exalted Zihua. More than half of the cultivators from the hundreds of worlds and thousands of continents around the sky Ho divine world had gathered here. At that time, Qin Hao bought the phoenix feather and the divine bone to create a physical body for his senior sister. Unfortunately, the shopkeeper was afraid of Lin Xian's power and didn't buy it in the end. It's actually him. Xiao Han also recognized him. It's you guys. I beg you, take me across the sea. The shopkeeper of the demonic beast shop pleaded. At that time, he was down and out, and now he was even more down and out. He almost lost his life in the chaotic battle. Just as he was in despair, his waving hands grabbed onto something. Perhaps this was fate. He actually grabbed onto Qin Hao's wooden boat. Why should I save you? Qin Hao said with a sullen face. I'm willing to sell the divine feather and divine bone to you. Young master, please save me. The shopkeeper of the demonic beast shop was in a life and death situation. His mind worked quickly, and he immediately thought of the key point. Sorry, I don't need it now. Qin Hao's foot kicked the shopkeeper's hand away bit by bit. He watched the shopkeeper's panic and struggle in the sea until he was in despair. No! The shopkeeper of the demonic beast shop shouted himself hoarse. Soon, his shout was bombarded by the emperor's law from the sky. His body was torn to pieces and drowned in the sea of Kunlun. Chapter 1997. The crossing of the sea continued. Looking down from the sky, the sea was divided into two distinct parts. The blue waves were constantly eroding the purple sea, and at the intersection, huge waves were surging and intertwining, forming a spectacular storm line. More than 90% of the cultivators were trapped in front of the storm line, unable to cross. Only a few people relied on their super strength to cross, advancing into the depths of the Kunlun Sea. The success rate of crossing the sea was less than 1 in 10. Qin Hao didn't save the shopkeeper of the demonic beast shop, so he missed it. Fate didn't let him get the phoenix feather and the godly bone in the divine workshop, which meant that senior sister's opportunity hadn't come yet. At this time, Qin Hao and Huan Zun were driving the purple boat forward. Chu Mao had completely disappeared from sight, and the great void sword was hanging by his side. The two purple boats they were on emitted two divine auras, which made the cultivators not dare to make a move. The second part of the crossing was relatively smooth. After a few more hours, the heavenly might that descended from the sky became more and more intense. Even Qin Hao felt as if his divine soul was being suppressed. At this moment, he discovered that the wood floating on the surface of the sea had changed color again. As a strong golden radiance shone over, the purple wood was replaced by golden wood one after another. We've entered the third part. According to Xiao Ning, the appearance of golden wood indicates that we're about to pass through the no-fly zone. Qin Hao said he didn't know if Chu Mao had taken a golden wood, but now he and Huan Zun had to make a move. There are only 100 or so. Wuck looked forward with a dignified expression. Compared to the hundreds of purple wood, there were even fewer golden wood. Even if less than 1 in 10 cultivators survived, there were probably more than 1,000 of them, and all of them had extraordinary cultivation. It could be imagined that the next fight would be more dangerous and intense. It was very likely that they would encounter the celestial wheel realm. Do it, Huan Zun shouted. It was safer to make a move first, and his divine power swept Wuck towards a golden wood. At this time, a figure suddenly appeared in front of them, blocking Huan Zun. "Friend, this boat is mine," an old man said in a deep voice. His body was filled with light particles, and one could faintly see the celestial wheel realm floating. Whoosh! A ray of sword light pierced through the air and pierced towards the elder. Qin Hao was too lazy to talk nonsense. He and the illusion elder were both Tian Luan realm cultivators. 2 against 1, there was no need to reason. The elder's eyes narrowed as he felt the sword while in the light of the great void. He thought to himself that the sword was so fast. He reached out with his hand, and a huge sky wheel radiance suddenly bloomed from his body. The divine power that it emitted was blinding. With a roar, he slapped towards the sword light. The elder's palm was like a hurricane, and he had the divine power of the wind path. In an instant, the wind raged in the void, and vortexes were formed, trying to crush and devour the Taishu divine sword. However, these vortexes were always a beat too slow and could not accurately land on the sword light. They were like small fish in a turbulent current, and the Taishu divine sword would often pass through the gaps, until it passed through the elder's bombardment and stabbed right in front of him. What an ingenious sword technique, the elder praised. His old face suddenly turned into a lion's head. He opened his mouth and breathed in, and then let out a lion's roar. The terrifying sound waves mixed with the roar of the storm broke the sword light with one blow and knocked away Qin Hao's attack. At this time, Huan Zun's action also arrived. His hand covered the elder's head, and a heavy roar came from the elder's head. The space was severely compressed by divine power, and this power hit the elder's body hard. Bang! The elder's body sank a few meters, and the soles of his feet touched the surface of the water until the seawater reached his ankles. He was about to fall in. He suddenly raised his head, and the huge lion's mouth opened, wanting to launch a counterattack at Huan Zun. "Break!" Qin Hao said in a majestic voice. His finger moved the void, and a red fireball suddenly appeared above the elder and fell into his mouth without warning. Rumble! A loud roar reverberated. Before the lion-headed elder could launch his attack, he felt as if his internal organs were being burned by fire. The lightning radiance on his body dissipated, and his lion head turned black. His exploding fur became even more fluffy. The instant his divine power was broken, he fell into the Kunlun Sea. "Out! Huan Zun, Wuck, you guys go first." Qin Hao yelled. Huan Zun's divine power wrapped around Wuck, and he landed on the goldenwood first. He controlled the water with his mind, but he did not go too far. Qin Hao looked to the left, and there was also a goldenwood floating there. However, there were several figures surrounding it, and 2 of them had Tianlin. Obviously, they had not made their move yet, and were observing the enemy. Qin Hao controlled the purple wood and rushed over. With a step, he passed over the crowd's head and landed on the golden wood. "Taking advantage of us when we are not prepared, Dao friend, isn't that dishonorable?" A middle-aged man's face suddenly sank, and he said coldly, To ambush, I am an old man over 1,000 years old. Young man, you don't have any martial virtue. Another person pointed at Qin Hao and scolded. He and the middle-aged man had been confronting each other for a long time, and he did not dare to attack rashly. However, the golden wood crossing the sea was taken by someone else. I have an urgent matter. Everyone, please make it easy, Qin Hao said indifferently. He glanced at Xiaohan and Quan Tong. The reason why he did not bring them along was because he knew that the people here would not let him take the golden wood. He, who is not anxious to come to this place, the middle-aged man said, you better give up the golden wood, or how about it? Qin Hao laughed. Give it up when it was already in his hands. Impossible. Young man, you don't have any martial virtue. Is that good? This is not good. I advise you, Haozi Wei, to reflect on it. Don't be so clever in the future. You have a divine weapon, and since we all have divine power, it is best not to fight among ourselves. The old man said righteously. Goodbye. Qin Hao was too lazy to talk nonsense. He controlled the golden wood boat to break through the blockade. Seems like you came prepared. Since that is the case, I will let you experience the old man's 5 consecutive lightning whips. The old man reached out with his pale hand. Blinding lightning appeared and condensed into a long whip. He lashed it towards Qin Hao, who was standing on the golden boat. 1 whip, 2 whips. According to the traditional rules of our 70 world, we stop when the time is right. In fact, you've already lost. If I lashed out again, your nose would have been smashed into pieces. However, I stopped in time and didn't hit you. You should admit that I hit your face first. You also felt my Tao intent. Qin Hao looked at the old man and lashed out 2 whips in the air. Was this a demonstration? Boom! Qin Hao raised his hand and threw out a flame dragon fist, hitting the old man's face. I was careless and did not dodge. My eyes were grazed by this weak fist. The old man covered his eyes with his left hand. Through the gaps between his fingers, one could see that his eyes were already swollen. However, Qin Hao did not activate the red lotus divine force in this punch, so he did not suffer any injuries. You talk too much. Take this. The middle-aged man could not stand it anymore. He held his fists together and hammered down heavily on Qin Hao's head. At this moment, his fist shook out a huge array emblem. Countless vines drilled out from the array emblem and wrapped around Qin Hao's body layer by layer, tying him up. The middle-aged man could not help but grin. After being tied up by his divine vines, even a great heavenly wheel expert would not be able to break free. Therefore, his attack would definitely hit. Qin Hao stood quietly on the goldenwood boat, giving off a feeling of giving up. Just as the middle-aged man's fists were about to land, endless sword chi radiated out from his body. The tyrannical sword will tore apart the vines wrapped around his body. Qin Hao pointed towards the sky. Swoosh! The great void divine sword beside him went up against the sky, flowing with crimson blood flames. With a poof, it pierced through the middle-aged man's fists and went through his head from between his eyebrows. The sword radiance flew into the sky. You? The middle-aged man maintained his punching posture and froze in the middle. His face gradually turned pale. Then, with a crash, his body scattered into light foam and was killed by the precepts. Even the great heavenly wheel could not protect his spiritual soul and died. Don't go too far. I am a martial artist. You kill me first, Qin Hao said faintly. Then, he looked at the great heavenly wheel old man and said, I will go first. Senior, do you have any objections? Because the old man had only whipped Qin Hao twice and purposely whipped the air as a warning, Qin Hao did not kill him. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Little friend, you don't have to scare me. I practice transforming strength. Even if you attack me with your sword, you may not be able to hit me. Even if you hit me, I can still dissolve your sword intent. In the 70s, it's all about using 4 tails to defeat 1,000 caddies. Not long ago, there was a strong man who couldn't even move one of my fingers. He insisted on having a try with me. I said yes, and as soon as I said yes, he stood up. He was very fast. Then he came up with a left front kick, a right leg whip, and a left jab. I blocked all of them. After blocking them, I naturally stopped at a certain point. The old man's face was full of intoxication as he chattered on. Master Ma, he left. A person beside him reminded him. At this time, Qin Hao had already left the sea area. Have you heard of the great heavenly wheel? Qin Hao stood on the golden boat and walked side by side with the illusion elder as he asked. I have heard of it. It is said that the cultivators, they're all people with extremely long lifespans. Their attacks do not go too far, and they regard martial arts as their life. The illusion elder said. He also felt that it was very strange. However, the martial art style of the great heavenly wheel was like that. Every heavenly Tao was different. If there's a chance, let's go take a look. Qin Hao thought of the old man who was chattering and holding back his moves. He could not help but feel that it was funny. However, the old man was definitely not funny. Qin Hao could feel that if the old man really released his cultivation, he would definitely be above middle-aged. Look over there. Xiao Han pointed to the front. Qin Hao and the illusion elder looked over. Suddenly, their expressions changed. Chu Mao, Wak said. Not far ahead, there was an intense battle between gods. Chu Mao and a heavenly wheel expert were fighting like a raging fire. They were evenly matched and had fallen into an extreme battle. However, Chu Mao's situation was not optimistic. From the looks of it, he seemed to be surrounded. This was because the heavenly wheel expert represented a huge force. He had already surrounded the golden boat that Chu Ning was on. Should we save him? The illusion elder asked Qin Hao. Although Chu Mao was strong, he was only one person. The opponent was a group of over 100 people. Not saving him. Wak said coldly. Before crossing the sea, Chu Mao had clearly told them that if Qin Hao was in danger, he would not help him. Moreover, along the way, Chu Mao had always wanted to leave them behind. In the end, Qin Hao had brought everyone safely across. Now, Chu Mao was in a difficult situation. Putting himself in Chu Mao's shoes, why should the Chu clan save him? Chapter 1998. Qin Hao stood on the golden boat and observed the battle quietly. He didn't take action immediately. Chu Mao came from a Chu clan, a divine path family in Kunlun. His cultivation was strong, and he wasn't affected by the will of the heavenly way. Ordinary heavenly wheel experts couldn't fight against him. Now, the other party was evenly matched with Chu Mao. If he guessed correctly, he was probably the last big shot of the three divine path families in Kunlun. In fact, as Qin Hao thought, the force besieging Chu Ning was the Kunlun Qi clan. The Qi clan, the Chu clan, and the Lin clan gradually dominated the Kunlun plain after the fall of the exalted Zihua and the retreat of the Kunlun plain. For 10,000 years, the three families fought openly and secretly to become the new ruler of the heavenly way. The three patriarchs were equally powerful, and no one could defeat the other. However, the Chu clan had the least number of experts, and their overall strength was slightly inferior to the Lin clan and the Qi clan. With the start of this year's event, the Chu clan only sent a heavenly wheel expert to escort Chu Ning to the event for convenience. However, they bumped into the Qi clan at the customs. The three families didn't interfere with each other on the surface and gave the illusion of harmony. However, once they had the chance, they would attack without mercy. As a result, Chu Ning was besieged. At this moment, among the many experts of the Qi clan, a young man was watching Chu Mao's battle with a smile. His aura was as strong as Lin Xian's. His name was Qi Zhuo, and he was the son of God Qi. Like Chu Ning, he was a direct descendant of a Qi clan. I was wondering why a magpie landed on the eaves when I went out today. It turns out that I met you guys. The Chu clan is really arrogant. They only sent one person to accompany me. Qi Zhuo smiled at Chu Ning. Qi Zhuo, what do you want? Chu Ning glared at him. Third Miss, why are you angry? As a descendant of a divine path family in Kunlun, Lin Xian and I often play with each other. Every time we send an invitation to the Chu Palace, we're rejected by you. However, your two brothers are arrogant and don't like Lin Xian and me. Today, we're lucky to meet you and have a good time. Qi Zhuo wore a playful expression. Naturally, He couldn't do anything to Chu Ning. As long as the Chu clan's ancestor didn't fall, the Qi clan couldn't do anything to the Chu clan. However, if they wanted to block Chu Ning's path and prevent her from entering the exalted martial artist's tomb, it would be too easy. Chizwa, if you dare to cut off my Mrs. Future, the Chus will never let you off. Chu Mao shouted as he fought. His opponent wanted to kick Chu Ning out. You still dare to be rude to this young master at a time like this? Teach the Chu clan a lesson. Chizwa was greatly displeased. Obviously, he was the one who had spoken to mock the Qi clan. Chu Mao was stunned. Li Chu-san, he actually managed to cross the crossing area. Who are you? Chizwa pointed at Qin Hao and shouted loudly. He was so disrespectful to the Qi people. I'm just passing by. You guys continue. Qin Hao waved his hand casually and did not reveal his identity. Masterly, stop fooling around. You guys came at the right time. Quickly give me a hand. Chu Mao shouted anxiously. The Qi people were stunned. Master, Chizwa was also stunned. It seemed that this person was not ordinary. He dared to call himself a master. He could not help but be vigilant. Moreover, from Chu Mao's tone, they seemed to know each other. I said I'm just passing by. You guys continue. Qin Hao drove the golden boat forward slowly. When he passed by Chu Mao, he did not even look at him. Are we very close? Wuk mumbled with a straight face. At this moment, Chu Mao's face was also extremely embarrassed. Masterly, Chu Mao offended you before. I hope you can forgive me and ask the illusion lord to help me. Chu Mao looked at Qin Hao's back and asked for help. Qin Hao was still indifferent. At this moment, Chu Ning, who was surrounded by the Qi people on the golden boat, smiled bitterly. If she had known this would happen, she would not have mocked Li Chuji on the way. Now, it was reasonable for her master to treat them as strangers. Chu Mao had asked for it. You scare me. I thought you were at the level of Master Lu. Men, settle this for me. Chizwa heaved a sigh of relief. With a ruthless expression, he ordered his men to attack Chu Ning again. How could he let the Chu clan go over? It was not easy for him to get a chance. If he destroyed Chu Ning's golden boat, the elders of the clan would also praise him. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Beams of Dharma laws flew out and blasted towards Chu Ning from all directions. They were not killing, but destroying the boat. Chu Ning closed her eyes. She was at the 6th stage of a Nirvana realm and could not withstand the joint attack of so many emperors. She was destined to be eliminated. Following that, as rays of nomological light gathered in a pile, the surface of the sea immediately surged with Emperor Law light waves. It was incomparably intense. Everyone thought that Chu Ning had fallen into the sea. Even Chu Mao pounded his chest and howled in grief. However, as the dazzling light waves dissipated, the smile on Chizwa's face stiffened and gradually turned into anger. Chu Ning's golden boat was not destroyed. Beside her, the silver-haired young man stood and blocked the attack with a strong sword curtain, protecting the golden boat. Master! Chu Ning felt Qin Hao's aura coming towards her. She could not help but open her eyes, feeling sad and happy at the same time. Leave with me. Qin Hao didn't give Chu Ning any time to react. He grabbed her hand, and the two of them escaped from the Qi clan's encirclement in a flash. They returned to the golden boat that Qin Hao had been on before. Thank you. Chu Mao choked with sobs and shed tears of gratitude. What transmitted his voice? Even he thought that Qin Hao would not make a move. Chu Mao can't represent the Chu clan. Moreover, Chu Ning did nothing wrong. Qin Hao replied. The Chu clan of Kunlun had the ancestor and patriarch, as well as the elders. They had a huge number of members. How could they reject the entire clan just because of Chu Mao? At least Qin Hao saw sincerity in Chu Ning. He could not sit back and do nothing. You bastards. Chizwa was instantly furious. His cold eyes stared at Qin Hao, who had elegant silver hair. Weren't they just passing by? Weren't they not familiar with each other? But they saved Chu Ning, who was about to be eliminated. This person was obviously teasing him and slapping him in the face. Destroy them. Chizwa shouted. He did not care where Qin Hao and the others came from. Since they dared to ruin the plans of the key clan of Kunlun, they had to be responsible for their actions. Kill. Many Chi people attacked and rushed toward the golden boat that was about to leave. Qin Hao pointed his sword to the sky, and the great void sword hummed beside him. Then, he slashed behind him without looking back. Swoosh! A sword radiance slashed out diagonally, as if it had split the sky. The monstrous sword fire burned fiercely, and all the Chi people in front of it evaporated, leaving behind blood-curdling screams that reverberated in the air. Divine weapon. Next to Chi Zhua, an elder's eyes darkened. A heavenly wheel emerged from his body, and traces of flames of the Dharma began to burn along the heavenly wheel. He pointed forward. Boom! A wave of fire swept out like a roaring fire dragon, rushing toward the back of Qin Hao and the others. Illusion Lord, Qin Hao said. Illusion Lord turned around, and his palms changed. He shouted, "Stop!" Suddenly, the void was crushed by a divine power. Cracking sounds could be heard endlessly. It was as if two doors had closed, closing everything behind them. Dong! With a heavy crash, the space was shattered. The fire dragon broke through the space barrier and roared out. However, at this time, Qin Hao and the others had already disappeared. Damn it, I'm so angry. Chi Zhua roared angrily. He raised his foot and tried to look around, but he couldn't find Chu Ning. Chu Ning had escaped, and all his efforts were in vain. Young Master Zhua, the person blocking us is a heavenly will cultivator. The elder of the Chi people whispered. He could feel that under the suppression of the heavenly law in Kunlun, Illusion Lord's divine power was not as strong as his. If they fought, Illusion Lord would definitely not be his opponent. However, it was not difficult for Illusion Lord to block him. Who is that, huh? Who can tell me who that is? Chi Zhua pointed to the empty sea and questioned loudly.